Hi all and welcome back to my YouTube channel. For the ones that don't know me, my name is Marcel van Berg and I'm a PADI Platinum Course Director. In this video I want to go over the PADI Open Water Diver manual answers. Hopefully this will help you to prepare for your PADI Open Water Diver course, or if you're already in the course, this will help you to complete your dive theory and prepare you for the PADI Open Water Diver exam. Alright, with no further ado, let's get into this PADI Open Water Diver manual answers of chapter number 1 video. Alright, right now when you are listening to this video, you're actually surrounded by pressure already. And what pressure is that? That's the air pressure that's surrounding us. I know you don't really feel it right now because you're kind of used to it and we're born into this pressure. However, there is a bit of pressure on top of us. Now how much pressure that is right now 1 bar or 1 atmosphere. To keep it a bit simple, to not mix it all the time, let's just focus on 1 bar right now, but they are the same thing with atmosphere. Okay, when we're going scuba diving, we're going to go under the water, which means that we now have an increase of pressure around us. Why? It's because now suddenly we're surrounded by water, which also weighs something, and that puts pressure on top of us. Now we still have the surface, the air pressure, also on us right now when we're going under the water. And that's very important to know to understand this question. Well, first of all, how much pressure do we have around us under the water? Well, for every 10 meters that you're going under the water, the pressure increases by 1 bar. So for example, when we're going scuba diving and we're going to go down to 10 meters of depth, you're going to have 1 bar of pressure above you. Then also we still have the pressure from the surface like I just said. So we're actually having 2 bar of pressure at 10 meters. 1 bar from the water and then 1 bar from the surface air pressure also. So let's say right now we're going to 20 meters. So we're going down to 10 meters first, 1 bar. Now we're descending even more to 20 meters, another 1 bar, so that's 2 bar. But plus the one from the surface is 3 bar. So we're going to 30 meters, 1, 2, 3 bar, plus the one from the surface is 4 bar. All right, 40 meters, I kind of think you guessed it now already, 5 bar. And how much bar do we have in pressure at 80 meters? Yes, very, very good. 9 bar of pressure. Now, don't think you're going to go scuba diving to 80 meters. Not yet. Your first 2 dives will be to a maximum depth of 12 meters. And then your dive 3 and 4 of the PADI Open Water course will be to a maximum depth of 18 meters. And then with the proper training, like taking the advanced course, you can go up to 30 meters. And you can also choose to do a specialty later to go up to 40 meters. But that will be your limit as a recreational scuba diver. If you want to go deeper than 40 meters, that's possible too. But this is technical diving. If you want to know a lot more information about your advanced course, the deep specialty, or maybe technical diving, go and ask your instructor and he can tell you all about it. Now, besides increasing the pressure when we are going deeper, we also have an effect on volume and on density. Okay, so how does this work? Let's say that we fully inflate a balloon at the surface, like, I don't know, it's your birthday or something. So you fully inflate it, now there's air in it, and now you put a knot in it. Okay, air, same as anything else, and a simple way of saying it is made out of molecules. So it is something. When we are going under the water with that balloon now, the water is going to surround it and it's going to put pressure on that balloon on all sides. So the more deeper we go, the more pressure and the more that's going to squeeze in that balloon. So when we're going down to 10 meters, remember from before we have 2 bar of pressure there. So it doubles from 1 bar at the surface to 2 bar at 10 meters. That means the balloon gets squeezed into half the size. So the volume becomes half. So that air doesn't escape. A lot of people think, oh, where does the air go then? But the molecules kind of get squeezed together a bit closer. So for this reason, the density inside of the balloon actually increases. So when we're going down, when we're descending, the volume decreases and the density increases. How much does this density increase? Well, that's always related to the pressure that you're under. So that's kind of simple. So when you first find out that it's 2 bar pressure at 10 meters, that means the density is times 2. Okay, so let's say, for example, we're going down to 30 meters. So remember at 30 meters, we got one bar first to 10, another bar to 20, another bar to 30, so that's 4 bar. So if we take that balloon down, it gets squeezed in 4 times as much, so 1/4 the volume. And that means the density inside of that balloon, the thickness, is now times 4. All right, and then the last one, remember, if we take the balloon down all the way down to 40 meters, then the balloon will be 1/5 of its size. Why is this important? Well, when we're going to go under the water, like we just discussed in question number 1, we're going to have an increase of pressure around us, which means we have to equalize our air spaces that we have inside of our body. So where do we have these air spaces? Well, we have what we call sinuses, and the sinuses are behind our face. And connected to those sinuses, we got these eustachian, if I can pronounce it correctly, eustachian tubes that go to our ears, and they connect to our eardrum that we have in our ear. We also have an airspace right here that goes down to the biggest airspace, which is our lungs. We also have a little bit of air in between our face and our mask, and we also have to equalize that, but that is something we're going to explain a little bit later. For now, let's focus on the ears mostly, because that's where you feel the pressure first, and that's what we need to equalize first. If you wonder, by the way, if you need to equalize your arms or toes during a scuba dive, no you don't. You know, that can't get squeezed in because we don't have any air spaces there. So only when we have our air spaces is really where the water wants to go to on our first scuba dives. So let's say tomorrow you're going to do your first dive. Picture your first dive and you're on the surface, and let's say that you're using a descent line to go down, so you're holding onto this line, you deflate at BCD, and now we want you to start equalizing when we're going down. And why? Is because if this is your eardrum, this is the outside of your ear, and then here you got your eustachian tube. The moment we go down under the water will flow into your ear, into your sort of ear canal on the outside, and it's going to start putting a little bit of pressure on that eardrum, and it's going to start bending it a little bit. This is not bad for your eardrum, and you might not even feel this yet. So this is really in those first few like centimeters, starts happening, and yeah, you kind of go like, oh, this is fine, you know, easy. I don't have any issues with my ears. But if you're going to go down more and more without equalizing, which you shouldn't do, then what's going to happen is that the water is going to press it in more and more and more until you start feeling, oh, there's something in my ear. And then more and more it becomes uncomfortable, and if you keep going and going, yeah, the eardrum at one point might get damaged. So I know this sounds a bit scary, but don't worry, it's very, very easy to solve, and that is by equalizing our ears. So how do we equalize it? Well, basically what we're trying to do is to create the same pressure inside as we have outside. And that is where our real lungs come into play as well. So what we can do, if when you're going down under the water flows in, bends in your eardrum a bit, just do version number A, which we also call the Valsalva maneuver. Basically what you do, you pinch your nose, you breathe out, but you close your mouth also, so it cannot actually go out. Then the air will go through your nose, but it cannot go out here as well. I know I speak a bit funny like this, huh? And then what happens, it gets pushed to our eustachian tubes, to our eardrum. And then the air goes like this, so when we're going down, it goes like this, and then whoop, and you press it back like that. This doesn't have to be hard. Actually doing it hard is really bad because you might now damage something else. So just gently. That's kind of how it works. Not hard at all. Now the trick is though to do it as much as you can. Okay, so you go all the way until you're down to where you have to be. You can also use a different technique if this doesn't work, and that is to wiggle your jaw like this and move your head maybe from side to side. Actually, you can try it right now if you want to. I know, no one's looking, right? It looks a bit weird, but you just go. Can you feel it? Can you feel your ears squeaking? Right, I can feel it. For me, it's not the most preferred way of equalizing my ears. Most people, like myself, we just love the first one, which is the Valsalva maneuver. Just works so well. You can actually try that now as well, but always be careful, especially on land, to never do it too hard. So just very gently, just to see if you feel something. If you don't feel something or only one ear, don't worry too. It's probably because you have a little bit of congestion blocking your sinuses or your eustachian tube. So make sure you blow your nose before you do this, and make sure that you don't have a cold or that you're sick before you go scuba diving. If you're not sure, check up with a physician just before you do your dive. Works fantastically. Now, if you have a feeling on your first dive that it's, or you have to still go into your confined water session and it's just not working, just talk to your instructor. I know you sometimes feel like you might be, special or something weird going on with you because everybody else can equalize, but trust me, many people have issues with equalizing in the beginning, but because it's kind of like a feeling and it gets better and better over time. You really start to feel exactly when you have to equalize. And everyone is different as well. So if everybody in the group can equalize except for you, that's perfectly normal. I pretty much have never, I think, taught an open water course where everybody could equalize. There was always 1, 2, or 3 people having some issues. And then in the end, sometimes they were even better at equalizing than the others because they sort of focused on it more. So don't worry at all. Only when you're really sick, then it just doesn't work whatever you do. And then it's time to stop and then just continue your course or your diving at another time. Anytime you're in doubt, just ask your instructor or ask a dive physician. So I just mentioned that you should equalize all the time when you're going down until you get to the depth that you want to go, and then continue your dive and look at cool stuff. But I know you guys are going to be excited, and that's important, but what we see a lot with new divers is that when they're going down in the first few meters, let's say up to 3 meters, they're so focused on this equalizing. So they're holding the line, you're equalizing and just, oh yeah, it works. Okay, this is weird. It's kind of working. This is good. So it's all good. But then after a few meters, you look down and whoa, and suddenly there's this beautiful reef and you see all these beautiful fish and you're going, wow, and you want to go there. And then we see our students getting a bit too excited and they might now go down without equalizing, and then of course you're going to feel it. If it happens or this happens and you start going, oh, what's happening to my ears? Just stop. You can never make it worse when you stop, so that's good to know. And then signal your body and your instructor, dive master, whoever is around you, that you have a problem with your ears. So this is the signal, I have a problem with my ears. At that point, what you need to do to solve it is just to go up a little bit and do so slowly. Probably your instructor or dive master will tell you to go up as well when you give him the signal that there's something wrong with your ears. Alright, so just very gently and slowly you go up. But the cool thing is you don't have to go up all the way back up to the surface. If you could equalize at 3 meters and you can't equalize at 4 meters, you just go up just very slowly to 3 meters again. And what happens is, so for example, the reason why we can't equalize, we call this a squeeze, is when the air pressure outside is more than the pressure inside, and it's too much. So you went to this point and you just went, it doesn't work. Remember, never do it too hard. So by going up gently, back to around 3 meters, your eardrum starts bending back by itself. At 3 meters it was equalized, so there you just go, it works again. And then just keep doing it all the time, and then you're going to be fine. If it really doesn't work, you can go up a little bit more to try that out. And in very rare occasions, it just doesn't work at all. And then you might have to go back up all the way to the surface. But this is usually then more because, again, you have congestion in your sinuses that you didn't know about before. And your instructor will probably ask you to blow your nose at the surface, get all that stuff out, and then give it another go. But again, there's a difference between having a little bit of congestion in there that you just need to get rid of, or having a cold and being sick. So if your instructor feels like that you might be too sick at that point, he might then ask you to cancel the dive and then continue on another dive when you feel better. Sometimes we see students forcing it, which means that they see the other group going, they feel pressured because they're the only one that are slow and having issues with the ears, or maybe just really want to complete this course and you're on a holiday and you have to leave and you're just under this pressure and you just think like, you know what, it doesn't hurt that much, but it feels really uncomfortable. I'm just going to push it through. No, this is really important that you don't do this because you can damage that eardrum and then you cannot dive for a very long time. Sometimes you just need one night of good rest to be able to continue the next day. So whenever you feel something, let your instructor know. He will give you the best advice. Maybe check yourself up with a doctor if you need to, and then continue your diving. But never, ever, ever force equalizing. By the way, if you want to learn more about equalizing your ears, I actually made a full video with some of the best tricks that you can use, way more than I just discussed, to equalize your ears, especially good for beginner divers. So after this video, check out my video section and scroll down or use the search bar and then look for my how to equalize your ears while scuba diving to watch that video afterwards. Well, I think we just answered that multiple times. Absolutely, when you're waiting too long, you're gonna feel always that uncomfortable feeling. It's hard to equalize, and when you're really too long, then it's just you can't do it. You get that squeeze and you have to go back up. So just do it all the time, like this, until you go down. Once you get experience, do you really have to do this all the time on the way down? Maybe not. Maybe you just find that perfect feeling and moment when you have to equalize. But when you're a new diver, it really, really helps. I sometimes get students back after dive number 1 saying, oh, I'm not sure if this scuba diving is for me. I had to equalize all the time. And I always react like, wow, that's great. Because that makes you prevent having an uncomfortable feeling. And also remember that when you're doing dive 1 and 2, we're still diving quite shallow, up to 12 meters. That means that the pressure pretty much doubles when you're going to 10 meters, remember, from 1 bar to 2 bar, which means that we have a huge pressure difference. So anytime you're going up and down a little bit, you have to equalize again. All of us, including the instructor and the dive master. So don't worry, it's perfect. Absolutely, never ever ever dive when you're sick. And if you don't know if you're sick, check yourself up with a doctor. And if you can, a dive physician would even be better. Sometimes we think we're like, oh yeah, I can handle this. It's just a little bit of a cold. But remember that this time we're going under the water. We're going scuba diving and everything is connected. Your sinuses, you're under pressure. And it is so important that we are healthy when we go scuba diving. There's always another dive. Now you might wonder, but what if I take medication? I take all that congestion out, it clears my sinuses, then it's easy for me to equalize. Well, yeah, in theory that makes sense. However, they did some studies, and in some cases, some medication can cause extra side effects when we're under the pressure. Some are maybe wearing off during the dive especially, which means that you might be okay going down or descending or being down on the dive, but then in the end when you're going up and the medication wears off and there's more congestion inside of your sinuses, now you might get a blockage on your ascent. And it's really not so easy, of course, to solve any colds or illnesses when we're scuba diving. So that's what we have to do on land. We have to sick it out, drink water, and make sure you check with a doctor before your next dive. Alright, you might have heard this already before, you might have read about it, and you might have worried a little bit going, oh my god, this looks a little bit scary. Because the most important rule, the answer is to never ever ever hold your breath and to always continuously breathe when we're scuba diving. And why is this so important? Is because when we're breathing all the time under the water, we're actually equalizing as well. And what are we equalizing now mostly is our lungs. So remember, every airspace we have to equalize. To equalize our ears, you just pinch your nose and breathe out and wiggle your jaws. But we can't really pinch our lungs anywhere, it doesn't really work. So how do we equalize it? Very simple, just breathe. So breathe in and equalize, and breathe out and equalize, and breathe in, equalize, and breathe out, equalize. So it sounds all a little bit scary about, oh my god, what can we do to prevent that we're having lung issues? But the solution is the easiest, which is just to breathe. Let's say that you don't. So for example, you are at a specific depth and you decide to take a huge deep breath in, hold it, and now decide to ascend, maybe even fast. Yeah, this is bad, and this can now damage your lung and might actually cause really bad injury, or it can even lead to death. And this is why the most important rule of scuba diving is to never hold your breath and to always keep breathing. Now you might go right now, well wait a second, when I was swimming in the pool normally, I always take a breath and then swim down a bit and come back up. That's okay, because you're not scuba diving, you're sort of free diving like we like to call it. So that means you're taking a breath on the surface. And what happens now is like blowing up a balloon at the surface, like we just discussed, putting a knot in it. It's the same thing as at the surface going and holding it, because your lungs are kind of balloons. And when you hold your breath, it's like putting a knot in it. Now when you now swim down under the water, then the pressure of the water is going to squeeze in your lungs, same as when we squeeze in a balloon. But now when we're going up again to the surface, we have less pressure, so your lungs now expand again to its normal size at the surface. Same as when we take a balloon down, it will get squeezed in a bit, and when we take it back up, it expands to its normal size. But that's called free diving. We are scuba diving, which basically means that we're breathing under the water. So let's say that you are at a specific depth and you take a breath from your regulator. It's the same as blowing up a balloon under the water all the way to the max, putting a knot in it, and now it's a fully inflated balloon under the water, and now you bring it up, yeah, the balloon's still gonna expand because there's less pressure to the point it might go. So remember, our lungs are like balloons. So if you take that breath under the water and you hold it, it's like that knot, you go up now your lung will expand to the point it might get damaged or even worse. I don't think your lung is gonna explode or you explode like that. That's a bit too much. But yeah, even a tiny crack or cut or damage of the cells can lead to some serious consequences. Now you might go like, oh my God, wait, ooh, what if I hold my breath, right? I know this is something that a lot of new students think, but you got to find out when you're going scuba diving, especially in the beginning, I think it's really exciting. You know, there's all these beautiful things to see, and we always breathe. I mean, do you normally hold your breath when you're in the supermarket? Not really, right? So most people come back from that first dive saying, oh, you know, I was really worried about holding my breath, but I never even thought about it. So don't worry too much. Just make sure that you're not under the water and go, and then start to ascend. And if you ever feel like you want to hold your breath, I never heard this or seen this before, but just signal your instructor and say, I'm not so cool, I don't know why, and just go back up to the surface with him slowly and then discuss the next step, okay? Don't worry too much, but it's important to never hold your breath under the water. All right, so that means we're halfway through to your PADI Open Water Diver manual answers of chapter number 1. I hope you're liking it. I hope it's helping you so far. And if it does, please don't forget to hit that like button under this video, because that will help me a lot. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you get notified when I upload future training videos. Of course, the next video will be chapter number 2, chapter number 3, 4, and 5. So if you want to watch all the chapters, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. All right, let's get into question number 8. So this right now is the opposite of a squeeze. So when we go down and you didn't equalize, you get a squeeze. This is when we're going up and we can't equalize. You might get what we call a reverse block. Now, on the way up, we don't actually have to do anything special to equalize. We don't have to pinch our noses or anything like that. The same as how we equalize our lungs, we just have to breathe normally. Because what happens? We're adding air into our sinuses on the way down to equalize that airspace. So now when we're going up, there's less pressure around us. So the air inside of our sinuses, it's going to expand outwards. Now, all of it is connected to our nose and to our mouth. So we're just breathing that air out. And you don't even feel that, which is fantastic. So you can just swim up slowly to the surface in the end of the dive. But if you have a little bit of congestion or a lot, or you do have a cold and you didn't listen to a recommendation about don't dive when you're sick, you might find that that congestion is now somewhere blocking the sinus or your eustachian tube, so the air cannot expand there. And that gives you an uncomfortable feeling, and that can happen anywhere. Usually people feel it right here, you know, like this area here, but it can also happen here or with your ears. Now, if that happens, what you do, you just go back down a little bit. Remember, stopping will never make it worse. And when you go down, the air gets squeezed in a little bit in our sinuses, which is fantastic. instantly feels better, and then you swim back up again, but now much slower. And then what happens if there is a little bit of air inside of your sinus, it just like sort of builds up that pressure and then just squeezes past any blockage that you have. And it's actually really relieving feeling. It's like, oh. I had it once in my whole career, and it was actually a kind of relieving feeling when it's squeezed out. However, try not to now look for that. I don't dive when you're sick, but yeah, it's kind of nice to know when it comes out, it kind of feels nice. Another trick that you can do if that doesn't work is maybe blow your nose under the water. This is a really cool trick, but make sure you keep your mask on your face, don't take it off, and just put your finger on the side like you normally blow your nose. You just go, and okay, that goes into the mask, but who cares? And then just clear it by breathing out of your nose. You will learn how to clear your mask later on when you're doing the skills. And then try to now go slower, and then probably because there's no congestion, it squeezes out quite easily. There's a cool little trick. Don't just try this out. Talk about it with your instructor just before you do this. Always make sure though that when you have an issue with a reverse block, that you always communicate to your body and to your instructor that you have a problem with some pressure in your sinuses, and then of course your instructor will help you to go descend a little bit and then go up a little bit slower when it happens. By the way, having a reverse block is very rare, so if you're worrying a little bit about it, don't worry too much, but it can happen. Another way that you can have a reverse block as well, before we move on to the next question, is maybe when you have like a filling that hasn't been done correctly, or you've done a root canal recently or something like that. So if you just went to the dentist for any issues, maybe let your instructor know as well before the dive so that he's aware of it. But a good dentist will always make your teeth in a way that this doesn't really become an issue. Remember from question number 1 is that when we are going under the water, that we have an increase of pressure surrounding us. This affects how fast we go through our air supply. I know this sounds a little bit strange, but let me explain it to you. Okay, assume that we have a scuba tank with full, let's say 200 bar of pressure, and you will be breathing from it from a regulator on the surface. I'm going to time you with a watch, and at one point you breathe all the air from the scuba tank, so it's empty. I stop my watch, and it took you 1 hour to empty the tank. Now it doesn't actually maybe take you 1 hour in real life, it might take you faster or shorter, just for this example. Okay, so at the surface with 1 bar of pressure, it takes you 1 hour to completely empty that tank. So now if you take that tank down to 10 meters, and you go down as well of course, with your regulator in, and now you start breathing from that tank, remember that the pressure at 10 meters is 2 bar. So it doubles from 1 bar from the surface to 2 bar. Now, because the pressure doubles, we now actually use our air twice as fast. So if you breathe from it, and then at one point it will be empty, I will stop my watch, and you breathe kind of the same as on the surface, let's assume that, then you should empty that tank in around 30 minutes. So how much faster do we then use our air compared to the surface? Well, that's very easy to find out because it's kind of the same number as the pressure that you are under. So when we're at 20 meters, we're at 3 bar, so our air consumption goes 3 times as fast. When we are at 40 meters, we are at 5 bar. This means that our air consumption will go 5 times as fast. So when you look at the question right now, and it says here, when we're going diving to 18 meters, which will probably be your maximum depth on dive number 3 or 4 on your open water diver course, you're going to find out that your air consumption will go faster than when you dive at 10 meters, which you probably go to on dive 1 or 2 because the maximum depth for that is 12 meters. Now don't worry too much right now. Some new divers, and actually I was one of them when I started my open water diver course, sometimes they worry a little bit going, oh my god, you know, it's going to be okay in the confined water in dive 1 and 2, but then when I do dive 3 and 4, maybe my needle's going to drop like that. Or I might not want to do the advanced course because then we're going to 30 meters and that is 4 bars, so 4 times faster. Oh no, I'm going to run out of air too quick. No, you won't. It doesn't mean that your needle's going to drop like that. But the deeper we go, it will go a bit faster. So we always recommend you to breathe really long and deep, slow breaths. Be super chilled out. And not just on deep dives, but on shallow dives also. Now in the beginning, you're a little bit excited. That's one of the reasons why we go nice and shallow. But once you do more and more dives, you be more and more relaxed, and you find out you can easily go to 30 meters or even 40 meters and still have a long, good air supply. And in the end, we never really go up anyway when the air runs out. We always go up way before that. I always recommend at 70 bar, it's time to start making your ascent. You might have a bit of a shorter dive, but you still saw some incredible stuff at depth as well, and it will get better over time. So don't worry too much. All right, question number 10 of this PADI Open Water Manual. Now you're going to find out that this question is going to come back a few more times. And actually, when you're doing multiple courses in the future, you're going to hear about this a lot too. If you ever want to become a diving instructor, and hopefully you will sign up with my PADI IDC course. By the way, you find the link in the description below. If you're interested, you're going to hear a lot about it because it's kind of like a baby of mine. Some people are never nervous, they love diving, they're never scared. But some people, they are a bit nervous. And it doesn't mean they're not good divers or they shouldn't dive. Actually, with a little bit of good training and some more experience, they might even become better divers than the people that were never nervous. But what I've noticed in my career, that almost any panic attack that happens to someone under the water actually comes from people being overexerted under the water. And being overexerted can be multiple reasons. Now here in the question, it says that you looked at fish, you're excited, and you're trying to chase it, and you're using too much energy, and now you sort of get short on breath, and that's an uncomfortable feeling under the water. It's actually very common for new divers because we see a lot of divers, they go down for the first time on the dive site and they don't really see anything yet, so they really focus on the equalizing and stuff like that. But then they start seeing the reef and the beautiful fish and they go woo, and they try to chase it and they want to go everywhere. But the more we move our hands, the more we use our legs, the more we swim, the more we get excited, the more energy we need, and the more energy we need, the more oxygen we need as well. So people start to breathe much more shallower. All our muscles and stuff like that need oxygen. You might go like, yeah, but I wasn't moving that fast. I mean, on the surface, I'm running all the time and I don't really get out of breath that quick. But that's because the water is much more denser than air. And it's much more resistance. So doing a movement like this in air might not take that much energy, but doing the same movement in water might take a lot more energy. So that's why we're trying to be like Zen masters under the water. I'm always a lot of energy on surface. I'm always like, yay, let's go, let's do this. But then under the water, you should see me. I'm like, I rarely even kick my legs. It's just, and I just look. Beautiful stuff under the water. Another kick. And breathe. It's really, really nice and gentle. Other reasons maybe why you can maybe get a bit overexerted is maybe swimming against strong currents. Having a GoPro or a camera. I don't want to be against it at all. I'm filming right now. I love photography, I love videography. But in the beginning, when you're unexperienced, you're still busy a bit with your buoyancy and clearing your mask and, trying to really enjoy the reef as well. And sometimes people, when they take the cameras too quick, they're all over the place with this camera trying to chase stuff. And actually, you don't really see that much anyway because you're so focused on that camera. So my recommendation, when you're doing your first dives, maybe leave the camera on the side and then, start using it when you have a few more dives or when you're doing your advanced course or at least when you're certified open water. But that doesn't mean that you cannot use a camera. If you really want to, talk it over with your instructor and then absolutely enjoy it. Just be careful because the more we use it, the more energy and the faster air goes and the more we have a chance to get overexerted. All right, with overexerted though, you might go like, come on, overexerted. I just catch my breath. Yeah, but because we have a bit of a dead airspace here and under the water, again, we have a lot of pressure on top of us, is that when you start breathing very shallow, you're building up a lot of carbon dioxide in your body, which triggers more and more breathing. And at one point, you're going to feel like you can't get enough air and you start thinking your regulator's broken or stuff like that. And that leads to panic and that leads people maybe bolting to the surface. And that's also not good, right? So you might go like, oh no, I don't want to do that. What happens if I get overexerted? Well, that's this answer to this question. it's really easy to solve. Just stop whatever you're doing, you know, when you start to go like this, and maybe hold on to your body. That really helps as well. And then just catch that breath. And that goes actually quite quick. So you can solve it very quickly. And no, we don't really always have to go up to the surface. But if you don't stop and rest and you keep going, you keep swimming and stuff, yeah, then it can lead to an uncontrollable hyperventilation, and then you might panic and go up. So be a bit careful of that. But again, we can prevent anything of this happening by just diving as slow and relaxed as possible. If you feel that your body's going too fast, or your instructor, please tell them, because they should slow down to your speed. We should always adjust to the slowest speed of the person in the group, unless certain conditions don't allow it. Okay, an object is neutrally buoyant when it displaces the same amount of water that it weighs. So when you put something in the water, it pushes water aside. If you take that volume of the water that is being pushed away and you would weigh that, it should weigh the same as the actual object itself. Then something is neutrally buoyant. And with neutrally buoyant, or buoyancy, we mean that something is sort of like in one place. It's not really floating up, it's not really sinking down, it's kind of just there. Positive buoyancy means that it's displacing more water than the object actually weighs. This gives like an upward force, and that makes it sort of like gets pushed up to the surface or float up to the surface. And a negative buoyancy is when we're displacing less water than the object weighs. It's really heavy and it just goes down. One of the reasons why, for example, you put a coin, you know, on your toe, on your feet, it doesn't hurt, it's very light. But when you put it in the water, it sinks. But when we put, for example, a cruise ship on our toe, don't do that, it's gonna hurt. You don't have a toe anymore, right? Or a foot. But when we put it in water, it floats. And why? It's because the cruise ship is designed in a way that it displaces more water than the whole object weighs. So it actually gets pushed to the surface. While the coin is designed in a certain shape that it doesn't really displace that much water, but it's really, really heavy. It just goes down. That's kind of how it works. So let's go back to the question. So in freshwater, if the object now displaces the same amount of it in waste, neutrally buoyant. But if you put the same object in salt water, it will float. But why? It's because salt water is a little bit more denser than fresh water, because it has salt in it. And because it has salt in it, it's a little bit more heavier. And that means that it displaces the same amount of water than in fresh water, but when you weigh that water, it's a little bit more heavier. So it displaces a bit more water than it weighs in weight. And that means it gets pushed up to the surface. You can't get around the safety part, having a buddy. And what does actually a buddy mean is that you are diving together with another person or multiple people. Sometimes you go like, yeah, but I love to get certified and I love to go scuba diving, but none of my friends scuba diving. How do I solve the problem? Well, if you go to any PADI dive shop in the world, then you can just walk in and say, hey, I would like to do a fun dive. I'm certified, open water, advanced, or any other level, but I have nobody to dive with. Then they say, oh, do a discover local diving, or what we call a fun dive. And we have a dive guide for you, and we put you in a little group, and we have other people that some of them don't have other people to dive with also. So you can find a buddy. It's really cool. Now, if you go to a very small place where they might not have other people, then your dive guide will be your buddy. But never try to just grab stuff and just go, oh, there's water, let's go, you know, because that can definitely cause problems. If you really want to dive by yourself and you think that's a cool feeling or adventure as well, then you can if you do the proper training, which is called the PADI Self-Reliant Diver. So if you want to know more information about that, then go and check with your instructor how to get certified in that. But for now, buddy systems are fantastic and I absolutely love it. So why for safety? I can go on for hours for this, but a couple of things. Remember what we said, if you get overexerted, you can hold onto your body, you can signal them, they can calm you down. If you might run too low on air or out of air, they will have an actual alternate air source under BCD in this triangular area that you can use and breathe from and still safely make it up to the surface. They can remind you to not swim too fast, maybe help you if you are getting too close to the coral. You can do body checks with a buddy. That means after you checked up your own equipment, your buddy will check you up one more time before you go into the water, just to be super safe. So there's just tons and tons and tons of reasons why a buddy system for safety is really good. By the way, if you don't know what your buddy check is, or it was a lot of steps and you can't really remember them during this PADI Open Water Diver course, go to my videos, and I actually made a really cool video about the buddy check in detail. So whenever you get rusty on that one, you can watch that to remind yourself. All right, so another one is practicality. Okay, what is this? Well, we have to carry the dive equipment sometimes on land, to the boat, off the boat, on land. We need maybe extra stuff like spare kit with, like, for example, spare mask, spare fins. We might want to have we want to have a first aid kit or some oxygen. And all this stuff is heavy, you need to carry it around, and sometimes we can't do it all alone. So having a buddy is really handy for helping each other carry equipment and reminding each other as well that we didn't forget things like the spare kit or the O2 or the first aid kit. So that's really awesome too. It helps as well on the boat. It maybe helps is when we get a bit nervous, and it can help us to calm down on the surface, help us into the water, into heavy equipment if maybe your back is not so good. So there's tons of reasons why a buddy system can help with that. And then the last one is fun. You might go like, yeah, but what if my buddy is not fun? I know, there's a very rare chance that your buddy's maybe not so much fun than the other person, but it's rare. And the most buddies, most people are really fun to hang out with. And especially when you've been traveling by yourself already for some time, then having that extra person to share your travel stories with and things like that is amazing. And we really see people meeting each other on a fun dive during diving. And then they go out of dinner together, they travel on together, and they become friends for life. We even seen some marriages coming out of this, so who knows? Maybe your lucky one is there once you get certified and go scuba diving. So it's definitely more fun. But also, like, have you ever, go to beautiful, I don't know, a sightseeing thing in a city or on your holiday, a beautiful viewpoint, mountain, lake, things like that, a beautiful animal that you just saw, and you just want to share that with others, and then there's no one around you if you're traveling alone. So having that buddy on that dive is so cool because you can share all the great things that you've seen under the water. Talk about all the beautiful fish and corals. And I know we got Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that to share things, but I think a real person is still better. So, should you already invest in your own scuba equipment right now? You might go a bit like, well, I'm just doing my open water diver course. I'm not sure yet if I would love scuba diving in the future. And I'm really low on budget, or I'm traveling on a low budget. So I really not able to afford this full set, or it's really heavy maybe to carry it around. So can I not scuba dive anymore? Yes, you can. Most dive shops in the world, they offer to rent equipment or include equipment in their course price, which means you got it all. So don't worry about it at all. However, having your own brand new equipment definitely is a little bit more comfortable in a lot of cases than the shop rental equipment. It's not unsafe, shop rental equipment. It's not bad and it's not uncomfortable. But of course, if you're gonna buy a brand new shiny, beautiful BCD that has all these extra, pads in the back and just fits you perfectly, of course you're going to be a bit more comfortable than maybe with a shop BCD, which is a basic BCD that a lot of people have worn already before you. It's kind of like, buying a second-hand car compared to a brand new car. Now, when we're talking about cars, some cars are much more affordable than other cars. Which one drives better? Which one is smoother and more comfortable? Sometimes looks a little bit better. Yeah, usually the one that's a little bit more expensive. So the same counts for diving equipment. If you invest a bit more money, you usually get a better design, more stronger, more comfortable, and in a lot of cases, it's a bit of an opinion, but it looks usually a little bit better as well. So there's things that you should consider and what you should think about. Oh, I really want my own equipment. I love scuba diving, but it's too expensive to get all of it. Well, don't worry. Just do it in steps like most of us do. Maybe buy your scuba mask first with a snorkel. Then the next time you buy some fins. Maybe the next time you buy a BCD or a wetsuit. Actually, the order in which you should buy equipment is a video that's in the making right now. So please subscribe to my channel, ring that notification bell, and then you will be notified when that video comes online, which I will give you really cool tips in what equipment you should invest in the beginning. So suitability, what does that really mean? Well, maybe you're going to be diving mostly in cold water. So a thicker wetsuit would be better than a thinner wetsuit if you invest in it. Maybe you'll be diving in warm water. Oh, maybe a rash guard or a thin 3mm shorty wetsuit. So I don't have to spend too much money on a 7mm wetsuit. I'm not sure I'm going to be diving in cold or warm water, maybe both. Well, now you know that you maybe can invest in a thinner wetsuit and in a thicker wetsuit. If you're not sure the size or the thickness, you can just ask your instructor, or any dive shop, a retail shop, or the salespeople in there will have all the information for you. For me, for example, what's really important is comfort and fit, especially fit, because when you have loose fins, you know, the kicking is not efficient. When our BCD, this is a BCD, buoyancy control device, when this one is loose, then what happens is that the weight of the tank will become, they go left and right, it becomes wobbly on your back like that. So it's hard to control your buoyancy. So if you're already struggling a little bit with buoyancy now, and you want to get better, and get yourself your own BCD. I particularly like this one, which is the Glide from Scuba Pro. And why is because it has this incredible soft, perfectly fitting harness for my body. I've actually never worn a BCD that fits as well as this BCD. So when I put it on, I was like that, like, you know, remember from Back to the Future with the shoes and the suit where you press the button, like that? It always gets reminded of that scene when I wear this BCD. It just feels fantastic. I feel more comfortable, I feel safer, and I can control my buoyancy better, especially when I teach people. I want to be able to turn around. Now, you might go a bit like, wow, that sounds a bit like a sales pitch right now. Should I buy that BCD? Well, this is the thing that's very important, is that everybody's a bit different. All of our bodies are different. All of our, you know, what we like under the water, our feelings are different. So this might be the perfect BCD for me, but it might not be the perfect BCD for you. So that's why always get proper advice from your instructor or in the retail shop from the salesperson. And some places, they even let you maybe try them out on an actual dive. They have these borrow BCDs, and then if you like it, you can buy it, or if you don't like it, you can get something else. So that's pretty awesome too, so you can look for that also. Yeah, and then fit, we kind of discussed that already, and comfort is kind of related to that as well. Especially with masks, before we move on. I know I'm going to do a whole video about this, but sometimes people just trying to sell you the most expensive mask. Yeah, it might be in your case the best one, but in the end, if that is loose or you feel it's not really on your face, then don't get it. You know, with the mask, the fit is the most important thing, and afterwards, how comfortable it is or how much vision you have is also important, but the fit is really important, and everybody has a different face. For me, it's important if I can equalize. As you can see, a bit of a big nose here. So sometimes I have the best looking mask, but it kind of gets stuck on my nose. Oh well, so I had to go for a little bit less good looking mask. But hey, it was a bit cheaper too, so that's kind of cool. All right, anyway, let's move on. Question number 14. Oh my God, we are almost there and almost finished with this PADI Open Water Diver Manual answers of chapter number 1. So let's get into it and finish this chapter. Question number 14. Oh my God, we are almost there and almost finished with this PADI Open Water Diver Manual answers of chapter number 1. So really awesome. So let's get into it. First of all, don't go diving with it, right? So have it inspected and surfaced as needed by a professional before using it. And how do you know it's a professional? Well, they need to have their special diplomas and licenses in surfacing a specific brand of equipment. So if you have, for example, an aqualung regulator, you can bring it to a technician shop for scuba equipment, but if that person is not certified or licensed to surface aqualung regulators, then you shouldn't go there. Even if that person is licensed to do another brand like Scuba Pro or can do it really well, doesn't matter. Now, most technicians in scuba diving equipment, they have all the licenses. The best bet, if you're really unsure, is to bring it to the actual manufacturer where you bought the equipment from, so the brand. And of course, they will have the best professionals and engineers looking at your equipment. Now, normally when we buy new equipment, then after 1 year, it's very unlikely that the equipment is malfunctioning or it's not looking good. It sometimes still looks brand new. It also depends a bit how many dives have you've done. But regardless if it's good or not, we still service it. So the recommendation is to service your diving equipment at least once a year, even if it's in good shape. Now, in this case, when you're unsure, please check the manual of your dive equipment and follow the recommendation of your manufacturer. More important, always follow the local law. And you can also get some advice, of course, from your dive shop and your instructor. Now, if you do feel that something is off, and in this case the regulator is breathing harder, and yeah, you might have just serviced it, or it might just be brand new, then don't just go, oh, it's not a year yet, so it should be okay. No, you definitely have to service it straight away, because yeah, things can break over time, and again, it also depends on how much you use it. Don't worry too much though, because with a good service, and the technicians put a big stamp on it, says it's okay, then you can definitely enjoy it again. So you don't have to buy new equipment all the time. First stages from our regulator system is what we connect on the scuba cylinder, on the valve at the top. So it creates a connection. Now there's a couple of different connections that you can have, but the most common ones are the DIN. So a DIN regulator stands for Deutschen Industrienorm, is a German designed screw system. So what happens is that your first stage will have a screw that screws into the valve of the cylinder. There's also another system which is called a yoke system, and it kind of creates a sort of pressure connection, so like that. It depends where you are in the world, what kind of valves they have on the tank, what kind of first stages they have at the dive shop if you want to rent equipment, or what you have purchased. But don't worry, if you purchase a DIN regulator's first stage and you go to a place in the world where they only have the yoke cylinder valves, then there's an adapter for that you can use instead of buying a full new regulator. These adapters are very cheap, so if you don't have one yet, go and contact your instructor or go to your dive shop and go and get yourself one of those adapters to take with you on traveling. Sometimes dive shops have them for you to borrow, but not always, so I recommend that you invest in one. Is there an adapter for the other way around? Absolutely, so it goes vice versa. There's multiple adapters. Question number 16 and the last question of this PADI Open Water Diver Manual answers chapter number 1. Wow, it's such a mouthful, isn't it? Really cool that you are still around, and let's finish this chapter. Okay, so we're going to finish up the chapter number 1 with, I think, one of the most important questions, and that's how buoyancy works and how do you control it. So remember that the most important rule is to never hold your breath, but I think one of the most important things to think about and to learn is good buoyancy control. The better your buoyancy, the more enjoyable your dives. The less air you consume, the safer the dive is. You won't touch any of the beautiful, delicate aquatic reef, but you can still come close enough to enjoy it. So there are so many reasons why good buoyancy is important. And wherever you are, you always hear it, buoyancy, 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 buoyancy. So you might find out on your first dive or second dive that your buoyancy is not going to be that good. It might be, but you'll probably be a bit all over the place. And it's tricky in the beginning, I really have to admit. Actually, I was really bad in buoyancy on my first diving experiences. My instructor called me a yo-yo diver. You know the yo-yo? I was going up and down all the time. And I was trying to control my buoyancy with my jacket, with my BCD, by you can put air into your BCD and release air. If you get too much, your instructor will practice this a lot with you. And I was like inflating and deflating and breathing in and right and left and all over the place. And I felt so bad about it, especially because some of the other students, they were just so good, right? Was I a bad diver? Would I never have a chance? Well, look at me now, and I'm a course director. So you just get better over time. It is the same thing as learn to ride a bicycle. The first time is like, if you can still remember it, it's like, oh my God, it's like almost impossible. And then you go to sleep, that's when we learn. The next time a little bit better, next time a little bit better. Before you know it, you're on a bicycle going to a city and you're seeing all these things happening at the same time and reacting on the traffic. at exactly the same time. And that's the same with buoyancy. So if you are not so good on your first diving experience, don't worry about it, keep practicing. Now, what we're trying to achieve is what we call neutral buoyancy. So if this is the bottom and this is the surface, and this is you, so your head and your legs, then we're trying to be like in this position and then, you know, like kick and then sort of glide over the dive side. Kick, glide, and look at pretty stuff. Kick, glide, really chilled. And slow. That's it. What you don't want is that you're like bumping into the floor, the bottom, reef, whatever, and then you have to swim yourself up, stirring all up the sand. You might be floating up all the time, which is also not good. It might be boats, or you might have to swim down using a lot of energy. So you really want to sort of have the neutral buoyancy. And remember what I said, we achieve that while we displace the same amount of weight than what we weigh. But how much is that? With all your equipment on, it's really hard, right, to calculate. So that's why it's more like a feeling. And on your first dives, you're going to be practicing this buoyancy a lot with your instructor. And then once you get that feeling, he will take you closer to the reef and you will see more things. So on your first dive experience, if you might not see that much aquatic life yet, don't be too disappointed. It's probably for a reason, because you have to learn buoyancy a bit first before we can enjoy the reef. The good thing about it is that your dives will always get better. So 50 dives are better than the first dive, and 100 dives are better than 50, and 3,000 dives are better than 100 dives, because you just keep improving this balance and feeling to the point you almost become like the Matrix under the water, and you just adjust buoyancy by just thinking about it. It's awesome. If you do find neutral buoyancy, what happens when we breathe in? We expand our lungs a little bit, we displace more water, and we're going upwards. And every exhale, we actually make our lung a bit smaller, we displace a bit less water, and we start to sink if we're neutrally buoyant. So we really want to control our buoyancy mostly with our lungs. So we're swimming and we breathe in and out and in and out. That's how we want to control our buoyancy. If you find yourself breathing in, but you're still like really going down to the bottom, then we need to have a bit of air in our BCD. And the reason why this is happening is because you're probably going to have some weights on your weight belt or in your BCD pocket. You can integrate them in most BCDs like this to help you get down in the beginning. Never overweight yourself, that's really bad, but just maybe, you know, a little bit of weight can help you to get down. So then we're slightly negatively buoyant, and it is harder then to find that neutral buoyancy just with your lungs. And that's where this BCD jacket comes into place. You just add a bit of air, like that. You can also do it orally if you want to, but this is easier. And then your BCD now starts to displace a little bit more water. So now we have neutral buoyancy, and then with our breathing in and out, we can control it a bit better. You might have to put a bit more air into it and a bit more, but if you keep pressing it, you're just going to float up to the surface. Or it's a signal that you put too much weight on you, which is not good too. So a little bit is okay, not too much. If you accidentally do put too much air in your BCD and you start to float up, which is very common in the beginning when you dive, don't worry too much too, because it's also designed to let air out with this button. So you just put it up as high as possible and you go, and then all this air will come out here. And then while exhaling, you sink down slowly again. Do make sure that you equalize again when that happens. This whole floating up and down will happen a lot on your dive number one for most people. Again, don't worry, your instructor is there to give you great tips. And once you get that feeling, it's a pretty awesome feeling, I can tell you. And it gets you really close to outer space. Like, you know, you're weightless, you're almost flying. You see a lot of people, I like to do it too sometimes, like we like to spread our hands like this sometimes, and we just go to the water like that. I know it's geeky, but I love it. It's just you're bird in outer space. You're an astro bird. Okay, that was too geeky. All right, anyway, so much more about buoyancy from your instructor during this PADI Open Water Diver course. You're going to practice it a lot. Don't worry right now if you don't get it. You will get it. Anyway, that's the last question and the end of the PADI Open Water Diver course manual answers of chapter number 1. underwater fish identification slate. They're pretty awesome to have. You can actually attach them to your BCD, and then under the water, when you see something that you like, you can find it and identify it and learn a little bit more about it. So they're pretty handy. As you can see on these slates, it's very colorful because all the fish have very beautiful colors, especially if you're diving in tropical areas. So now you're at 12 meters, you're seeing a pretty fish. It kind of looks like this one. You're looking at the name and it says red fire goby. Then you look at the picture and it's kind of brownish and white. And you kind of go like, wow, why is it called red when it clearly looks brownish? It's because if you would take this slate back up to the surface, now you look at the fish, it actually does look very, very red. And that's because water absorbs colors. And the first color that disappears when you go under the water is red. And it starts to become, looking a little bit brownish. If you want to know what other colors will disappear, well, it's kind of the same order as the rainbow. So after red, kind of orange starts to go away, and then yellow, etc., etc., etc. The deeper you go, the less colorful things will be. That is why sometimes when we have our students coming up from dive number 1, where we went to a maximum depth of 12 meters, a lot of them are super excited, it was so cool. But I do get the question saying, hey, it wasn't so colorful at certain points during the dive. When I was watching National Geographic underwater documentaries, it's much more colorful. But that has to do because when they film those documentaries, they have these big lights on the side of their cameras lighting up the reef and the colors that they produce. And that's the reason why. Another reason is sometimes you guys have been snorkeling a lot where you've been very close to very shallow reef or fish, and then the colors will be much more intense as well. Now, it doesn't mean now that when you go scuba diving, you're not going to see all these pretty colors that you imagine. There's lots of beautiful things to see, and there's lots of colors still to see. Some colors are extremely intense. However, it's going to be a little bit less than when you're seeing it extremely shallow or on land. So another thing that happens to us under the water is that objects appear larger and closer to us. Now, this is called refraction. Now, when you're under the water for your first dive, you might, think like, hey, I don't really see a big difference. But that's because everything around you is sort of becoming larger and closer to you. So you can't really compare it. But there's definitely a difference. For us, as instructors, we have quite a lot of experience. And we kind of know a little bit more about the differences between it. So it's kind of funny when our students come up, when they say, wow, it's so cool. It's all this really big fish. And then we're kind of know that fish is kind of a bit smaller than what they say. But it doesn't mean they're lying. It's because you think it is really big because of refraction. Another thing that we notice is sometimes our students are too far away from the reef or the group because they think they're close because of this refraction effect, but actually in reality they're a little bit farther away. So when your instructor tells you to come a bit closer, don't worry about it, just come a bit closer, it's all okay. Now, we don't want you to get too close to the reef though, that you might touch it, but on the other hand, we also don't want you to be too far that you can't enjoy or see anything, or might even start to float up all the way back up to the surface. So again, colors gets absorbed under the water, and objects appear larger and closer when we go scuba diving. All right, let's look at question number 2. So this question is quite important, and if you haven't watched it yet, please after this video check out my other video where in chapter number 1 I explain this question a little bit better. Alright, let's talk about trim first. So when this is the bottom and this is the surface right here, and let's say that this bottom is right now 10 meters deep, so it's perfect for dive number 1 and 2. And you're here, this is your head, these are your legs. Then we would like you to be in this position, just above the reef, not too close that you can touch it and not too far that you can't see anything. In a beautiful horizontal position, which means like this and not like this or like that. We really want you to be as straight as possible. Because what happens now when you kick your legs, you kick and you're actually going to where you are kicking, to where your legs are pointing from. So kick and then you go. And kick and there you go. that's one of the reasons why we want to be horizontal and in a proper trim. If you're going to be slightly like this and you're kicking your legs, you're just going to swim back up to the surface, or in the other way, you're just going to swim into the bottom. So we really want to sort of swim to where we want to go to. Now, another reason for this as well is that it's extremely effective to move through it. Because, like we already discussed in the previous chapter, is that water is much denser than air. So if you're in this position, the water pressure is like everywhere on the front. You're sort of moving like this, and it's really hard to get to all this water. But if you're in this position, the water is only touching sort of your head, and then it sort of goes over. So like an airplane or a Formula One racing car, you're just kind of trying to go through it as efficient as possible in this proper trim position. We don't want to flap our hands or anything because it just uses more energy. I know it's weird, but I know you're used to swimming like this or like that on the surface, but it just uses more energy. It's bad for our air consumption, and you might touch things as well. And it's just not effective at all when we're scuba diving. So we just want to use our legs to move forward. So with our hands, we hold them like this or like this. Maybe next to you, behind you. You can hold onto your BCD, which looks pretty cool. Your instructor might give you some different tips as well, how to streamline your arms. So the proper trim is in this position. Now we're moving into streamlining our arms. And of course, another thing that's important when we want to streamline is our equipment. Because when you're wearing your BCD, your jacket, you're going to have some hoses on the side. And for example, your SPG, which is your air gauge, you want to tuck that into your BCD or clip it onto your BCD. An alternate air source, the second stage, the octopus, which you can give to our body or anybody that might need to use that if in the unlikely event to run out of air. You want to click that or attach it anywhere in a triangular area on the front of your BCD as well. But you don't want to have it bungling, under you, because you're just going to get entangled in the reef or maybe damage your equipment or the reef itself. So have everything streamlined and have your arms streamlined as well. All right, and then the last one, it says swim slowly and steadily. That's very important as well because, like I just said, the water is much more denser than air, so it's much more harder to get through it. So if you're gonna go really fast or you're trying to go really fast, you're gonna use too much energy, you're gonna breathe very quick and shallow, which might lead to a panic moment or overexertion. Your air consumption will go really fast as well, and it's just really uncomfortable, and you don't see any cool stuff because you're moving so fast through the water. So the moment we are under the water, we're scuba diving. Kick, kick, and glide. Kick, kick, and glide. Nice and slow. Trust me, it's harder than it sounds, and your instructor will probably tell you a few times on your first dives to slow it down, but you get better at it over time, and after, 50 to 100 dives, it's like you're just gliding through the water. It's an absolutely amazing experience. Some of the best new scuba divers that we see around, they already do this on their first dive. So if you want to impress your instructor on your first dive 1 and 2, or even 3 and 4, then really try to move super slow, unless of course they ask you to come a little bit closer. It depends all where you're going to be diving, of course. If you can be diving in very cold water, you can be diving in super warm tropical waters, or anything in between. The colder the water is, the more this becomes an issue. However, it can still be an issue in nice warm tropical waters. Or sometimes, for some people, even more, because, I'm from Holland, and I just notice sometimes from people that come from, some colder countries like Northern Europe, Scandinavia, North America, Canada, they are so used to the cold, is that when they actually arrive to a tropical area and they find out that the water temperature is like 22 degrees, they go, oh my God, 22 degrees? In my country, it is always 1 or 2 degrees or even below zero. So they think, they can just go in a very thin wetsuit or or shorty, and there will be no issues. But because water is denser than air, it also takes the heat out of our body much faster, around 20 times faster in water than in air. And that's a lot. So that means that even when the water temperature is 22 degrees Celsius, which makes you think like, oh, that's really warm, it actually isn't, especially if we're under there or in there for a longer period of time. And when we're doing scuba diving, a short scuba dive, very short, like 20 minutes, a little bit longer, still short, is 30 minutes. Average is 40 to 45 minutes, and long ones are 1 hour plus. So you can imagine how cold you can get throughout that time. So listen to your instructors, listen to your dive guides and leaders, do always a local orientation when you go to a new location, and they will tell you the temperature of the water and recommend you the right exposure suit. If it's really nice and warm, so for example, if it's like 29 degrees Celsius, 30 degrees, you can easily dive, for most people, with a 3mm shorty wetsuit. Or even just a rest guard and your board shorts. It's perfectly normal as well to dive in that. When it comes to 27 degrees, well, personally, I'm getting a little bit chilly already. I would like to have at least 3mm and maybe a bit longer wetsuit. 25 degrees, woo! But I'm a bit spoiled as I've been diving always in tropical areas. For me, 5mm long wetsuit, and 23, 22 degrees, absolutely still the same. And below that, I already need some thicker wetsuits. But then again though, another person, they might laugh at that and they say, the 25 degrees, I can still dive in a 3mm. So it also depends a little bit on the person, and you kind of have to test this out. But what's really important that if you are under the dive and you start to become too cold, you start to shiver, your jaw starts to go, maybe you get a little bit blue lips, or you can recognize this at your body, then it's time to just cancel the dive and go back up to the surface and seek warm. Because if you don't, that can lead to hypothermia, and that can be a serious condition. So there's always another dive, just cancel it, and then just do the next dive. Question number 4. This question was already very well explained in the PADI Open Water Diver Manual answers of chapter number 1 on my previous video. So again, if you haven't checked it out, go and have a look at that after this video. But I'm going to explain it one more time, and I'll probably explain it again a few more times in the future, because this is a very important thing to understand, know how to recognize, and know how to solve. And why is this? It's because when we're like super calm under the water, like I just said, and we just kick and we glide, we look at some cool stuff, and we kick and we glide and look at some cool stuff, we're almost using no energy at all, which means that we don't need to breathe very fast, and we can breathe really slow and deeply in and out. I hope you're still with me. This is the way we want you to breathe. Because of pressure, and we have this dead airspace, if you're breathing, you're building up all this carbon dioxide, and that triggers just more and more breathing, and then there's a bit of a dead airspace here, so it's really hard for your airflow to go around, and that means it feels, or you get a feeling that you don't have enough air, or you're suffocating, and that leads to panic, and then of course you just want to go up, and a lot of people that have this issue then go up too fast, which is also not good, so it leads to all these problems. Way to solve this just by being relaxed. You will never get into this feeling. However, sometimes even when you try to be relaxed, it still can happen. And why? It's because maybe, like in this question, it says an unexpected current can occur. And when this current comes, it's going to push you a certain direction. So if you're trying to counteract that, you're going to have to use a lot of energy, and you're going to breathe a lot more. So sometimes we see people getting pushed away from the reef, and they go like, oh, I'm just gonna, it's right there, and they're just gonna swim, but it's already too much. So if that happens and you just start to get out of breath and you feel that super uncomfortable feeling, then you can actually solve it quite quick as well, but just catching your breath. And that means do not keep swimming, do not keep moving around, just relax. It's very handy to hold onto your body, that is so nice, and just catch that breath. And once your breath is caught, you're ready to go. You can just continue your dive, or if this current now is too annoying, too strong, it's just gonna push you away from the reef, and just cancel the dive, go back up, just do another dive. There's so many more dives you're gonna be doing. All right, this is an important rule and an easy rule, but for some reason, out of my personal experience, I have seen this rule being forgotten, ignored, and just people don't even know about it in some cases, even when they're certified. And every single time, it causes a problem. So it's very important right now to understand this one and to always follow this one. And always include it as well in your briefing whenever you meet new people. So whenever you're diving with a buddy, it doesn't have to be two people. It can be one person or two or three or a whole group. The general rule is, if you get lost from your buddy, if you get separated from the group, then you should search for no more than 1 minute and then slowly surface to the surface and reunite at the surface. If you don't like it, that's not really mentioned here, but if you don't like to be under the water alone for a minute, you can always go up straight away, but never too fast, so nice and slow. And then if you go up straight away and you're at the surface and you don't see anyone, wait for a little bit, because they might be searching for you for around a minute, and then they should come up to the surface as well. That's why it's so important to not search for longer than 1 minute, because if the other people or other person does it correctly and search for only up to 1 minute, goes up to the surface, and you're still searching after 2 or 3 or 4 minutes, that person on the surface becomes very anxious, thinking that maybe now something worse is happening. Starts to maybe shout for help, EMS might be alerted, and all these people are involved, and then in the end, you're just searching all by yourself for longer than 1 minute. So it's very important to never search longer than 1 minute. Just go up to the surface and reunite with that person. If that person doesn't show up over time, then we can go into the next procedures of, for example, doing search patterns, finding that person that's missing under the water. This is something that you learn more in your PADI Diver Rescue course. And if you want to learn more information about that, then just ask your instructor at any time during the course. Because when we're diving with another person or persons, not every person you're going to be diving with is going to be scuba diving the same way that you like to scuba dive. Some people are slower, some people are faster, some people have underwater cameras and they just concentrate just on their camera. They don't care so much about you. Like, if you have the same body that you dive with all the time, of course you're gonna have a very good team under the water. But when you are traveling around and you want to go fun diving in different dive shops around the world, you're going to be teamed up a lot of times with people that you just don't know. And some people are just nicer and better and safer than others. And some people are just extremely selfish. They swim really fast, they only focus on their cameras, they don't care about you at all. So because you never really know your body and how good they are to you, it is always your responsibility in the end. And if you feel that your body, for example, is swimming too fast, then you should then at any point try to catch them, try to grab their fin, pull their fin a little bit and say, you, slow down. I want to look at all this stuff. And if those people then don't listen, now it's time to cancel the dive and just go up. But a lot of times you just have to remind someone to slow down a bit, and they go, oh yeah, sorry, and now they slow down. Or when they so focus on the cameras, maybe you can tap them and say, hey, you know, I'm here, remember, maybe check my air, and they go, oh, sorry. So it's your responsibility in the end. We see it a lot with the body checks as well that we do before the dive. So it's a check to just double check if you put all your equipment together the right way, if you're wearing it the right way, if it's all streamlined, if the air is open, etc. So in this particular case, if people get very experienced, then a lot of people don't want to do this body check anymore because they think they don't need to. And that's why if you feel that your body is sort of like skipping and says, yeah, you look good, let's go, you can tell them, hey, I'm really sorry, but I really want to do a body check. It just makes me feel much more comfortable during the dive. By the way, if you want to know about what a body check is, go and check my videos on my channel. I have multiple videos explaining in detail how to do a body check. So they're great for now when you're doing this PADI Open Water Diver course, or in the future if you need a bit of a refresh. So we have 50 bar that we want to keep as a reserve, and we want to have 20 bar for our safety stop. So if we add those together, that's 70 bar. So if I now do 200 minus 70 bar, I have 130 bar left. So if I then have 130 bar and I divide that by 3, which is the rule of thirds, I get 43 bar. So now when I take 200, which is our full scuba cylinder, and I subtract 43 bar, I get 157 bar. And that's the time to turn back to our entry point. Question number 8 of the PADI Open Water Diver Manual, answers of chapter number 2. You guys are doing absolutely fantastic and you are halfway through. If you're liking it so far, please don't forget to hit that like button. And also please don't forget to subscribe to this channel and ring that notification bell so you're getting updated every time I upload a new scuba diving training video. All right, let's get into this question. All right, having a loose fin strap can happen once in a while. Maybe because the fin strap is a little bit old or it's worn out. Maybe because you haven't serviced it on time. Or sometimes because you accidentally didn't just put it on the right way and you didn't cut it during your body check as well. Sometimes it happens as well when we're jumping into the water. So there's all these different reasons why this can happen, and it's not always the end of the world. But if you're trying to keep swimming on the surface with a loose fin strap, you might lose your fin, or it's really hard to swim because your fin is really loose and it's all over the place. So if this happens, make sure you keep your mask on, regulator in, double check that you fully inflated your BCD until you hear that air pop, pop, pop coming out of your BCD. All right, then signal your buddy or say, hey buddy, scream, say, I need some help with my fin strap. And then he or she will come over, and then together you can fix your fin strap and continue your swim on the surface to your entry point for your scuba dive, or exit point if this happens in the end of the dive. If you can't get your fin strap on at all, then it's time to just cancel that dive, go back to the boat, and fix it. And if there's enough time, you might go back into the water and do the dive, or wait for the next dive. Question number 9 of this PADI Open Water Knowledge Review, chapter number 2. Here we go. All right, so to make a descent, what we like to do every time that we're going down under the water, we like to do a 5-point descent. And to remember the steps of these 5 points, we can use sorted. So the S is step number 1 in a 5-point descent, which means signal OK to go down. Step number 2 is the O from orientation. So we're basically looking around on the surface. Where's the boat? Where's land? Where are the buoy lights, descent lines? Other boats maybe in the area. And don't forget to always look down with your mask on from the surface to see where you're going to, so everything is clear. Maybe have a look at the descent line if you have a descent line. Number 3 is the R from regulator. So if you're having your mask and your snorkel on the surface, now it's time to switch over from your snorkel to your regulator. You might want to perch it a bit to get the water out of the regulator and put it into your mouth and start to breathe. I always take a moment to now double check with my buddies to make sure everybody, including myself, have a regulator in. So step number 4 is time. And we just want to double check our dive computer. You have it on your wrist, you might have it on your SPG to make sure that all the settings is okay and to remember your descent time. And then we got E and D, which is step number 5, which means equalize, elevate your deflator hose as high as you can, deflate, press the deflator button, exhale, and slowly descend down. And that is the 5-point descent. I get a lot of questions from people later that says, oh, I can't remember the 5-point descent steps. Can you help me out? Or if you check the videos on this channel, I made multiple videos about all those 5 steps to help you to remember it in the future. So check out my other videos on this channel. So wetsuits are made out of neoprene, which means that when we're going down and we got the pressure of the water surrounding it, it's actually gonna compress the wetsuit a little bit, depending on how deep that we are. And first of all, when we make the wetsuit thinner, we're also displacing less water, so we're losing a little bit of buoyancy and we might start sinking or descending too fast. That's why adding a bit of air once in a while is very handy to control your descent and control your buoyancy so you don't go too fast. And that's the only reason. Question number 11 of the PADI Open Water Diver course, answers of chapter number 2. There's very rare occasions that you might not have a reference, and then you of course have no choice and you still in the end need to make an ascent when you need to. However, if you're planning your scuba dive correctly, then you should always try to have a reference going down or going back up to the surface. And a reference can be different things. Like for example, you can use a descent line, which is a rope that goes down to the bottom. Maybe a sloping bottom contour when you're doing a shore dive, so the bottom is the reference. Sometimes a wall or a pinnacle can be a reference as well. Some cases you can hold on to the reference, like that descent line, which is also really handy to slow down your descent or ascent, or it helps with equalizing your ears. Some people get really calm when they hold on to things, so that's really nice. Now, if it's a sloping bottom contour or a wall or a pinnacle, you can't really hold on to it, but then it still gives you an orientation point, telling you which way is up and down, guiding you to where you have to go. So it's always better, especially if you feel a little bit nervous about this whole scuba diving experience or this PADI Open Water Diver course, then having that reference can really help you. So ask about it with your instructor and he can give you some really good tips how to use a reference on the scuba dive properly. The first one says you should never send faster than 80 meters per minute or try to even be slower than that. And that's absolutely true. You also find this rule on your RDP, Recreational Dive Planner, and it comes back over and over and over again in multiple PADI courses. Why is it so important? Is because you're going to learn a little bit later in the PADI Open Water Diver course, answers of chapter number 4, that when we are going under the water, we are exposed to absorbing nitrogen. Because going up too fast, faster 80 meters per minute, can lead to decompression sickness, which is basically your nitrogen that you absorb during the dive coming out of the solution, out of your tissues too fast, and they become too large, and now they can get stuck at certain places in your body. And this can cause real problems, and you can definitely get injured from this. So always, whatever you do, make sure you ascend at any time, even if it's a little bit, or in the end all the way up to the surface, slower than 18 meters per minute. During this PADI Open Water Diver course, your instructor will practice this with you a lot. Another one is stopping for 3 minutes at 5 meters in the end of the dive. We call this a safety stop, and the signal for safety stop is 5 meters for 3 minutes. Why do we like to do this stop? Because if you're doing no decompression diving, you can always go back up to the surface without making a decompression stop, like they have to do in technical diving. This is not a decompression stop, it is a safety stop, which means that, hey, we're not in a rush, we have a lot of time, and why don't we stop for at least 3 minutes at 5 meters, which is right in between the surface 0 and 10 meters of depth. And remember from before that I explained that the biggest pressure change is between 0 and 10 meters, where it goes from 1 bar to 2 bar. So in the end, when we're making our ascent, you're going from 2 bar to 1 bar. And that's where the pressure difference is really big. That also means we have a higher risk of getting decompression sickness or other issues. So it's really important to us to stop at 5 meters, and now we have a chance to lower the amount of nitrogen we have in our body, and now that makes our last 5 meters even safer. So always try to do a safety stop in the end of the dive. And then the last thing is to adjust your buoyancy in frequent amounts. So remember what we also discussed before. When we are making our ascent, we're actually reducing the pressure around us, and that makes any air volume expand. So when you're swimming up to the surface, that area, that jacket now starts to expand also. And remember, the more water you displace, the more buoyant you get, and you might get an uncontrolled ascent or a too fast ascent. That is why when we're swimming up, we have our right hand above our head. I hope you can still see that with the video frame. And then our left hand is right here, where we're holding up the deflator hose of our BCD. And you have the deflator button right here. So when we're swimming up, just swim up with your legs, looking up, and you feel that the air is expanding. You just let some air out of your BCD like this. Sometimes you have to do a lot, you have to hold it down all the way. I like to actually empty it fully and just swim up to the surface and hold it down continuously. But some people, they prefer to maybe just release the air, let it go a bit, release the air, let it go a bit. It's a little bit up to you, and also ask your instructor for his or her advice. Now to go up, we like to use what we call a 5-point ascent. So step 1 is signal okay to go up. Step 2, we like to check the time, so we like to check our computer and the ending time of the dive. Step 3 is to go into ascent position, which is again holding your head above your head to protect it. Hold your hose up, press the deflate button to release that air. Step 4, we like to look around to make sure everything is clear. And then at step 5, we like to swim up nice and slowly, rotating, making sure we have a beautiful clear view above us. Once in a while, look at your buddies, look at the instructor if you're doing a course, and just slowly swim up until you reach the 5 meters for 3 minutes to do your safety stop. And then in the end, use that same ascent position again to go up to the surface. At the surface, fully inflate that BCD until you're air releasing, so you're nice and buoyant, and then switch from your regulator back to your snorkel and signal that you're okay. All of this sounds like a lot. Again, check my other videos. I have a lot of videos how to do the 5-point ascent, but you can also, of course, ask your instructor, and you'll be practicing this a lot during your PADI Open Water Diver course. Question number 13. Now actually, before we get into it, I hope you're liking it so far. I hope this is helping you do your PADI Open Water Diver course. Actually look below this button, there's a join button. Maybe after this video you can click on that, and then it explains how you become a member of my channel. And then for a small donation, you get really cool perks and all kinds of emojis, and you also help to support my channel so I can keep making these training videos for you. Anyway, up to you if you like to do it. Let's now go into question number 13. Now to go up, we like to use what we call a 5-point ascent. So step 1 is signal okay to go up. Step 2, we like to check the time, so we like to check our computer and the ending time of the dive. Step 3 is to go into ascent position, which is again holding your head above your head to protect it. hold your hose up, press the deflate button to release that air. Step 4, we like to look around to make sure everything is clear. And then at step 5, we like to swim up nice and slowly rotating, making sure we have a beautiful clear view above us. Once in a while, look at your buddies, look at the instructor if you're doing a course, and just slowly swim up until you reach the 5 meters for 3 minutes to do your safety stop. And then in the end, use that same ascent position again to go up to the surface. At the surface, fully inflate that BCD until you're air releasing, so you're nice and buoyant, and then switch from your regulator back to your snorkel and signal that you're okay. All of this sounds like a lot. Again, check my other videos. I have a lot of videos how to do the 5-point ascent, but you can also, of course, ask your instructor, and you'll be practicing this a lot during your PADI Open Water Diver course. So what is a wetsuit? Well, let me do my Superman. And now I'm wearing a wetsuit. So as you can see, it is a bit thicker than wearing, for example, a rash guard, but not as thick as a big dry suit. This one is a 3 millimeter. A lot of people, they like to dive with a 5 millimeter full wetsuit, and some people, they like to be a little bit more free and they like to have a 3 millimeter shorty. So basically for me personally, when I'm scuba diving in the water that I'm used to, I'm or diving in a rash guard or in this wetsuit. To be honest though, I prefer diving in a rash guard if I can, but it's not always possible with the temperature of the water. So in this case, with the wetsuit, the water will go into the wetsuit, and then it's nice and snug, so it stays trapped between the suit and my body. My body very quickly heats up that little bit of water, and that water now becomes warm, and that heats me back up. That's kind of how a wetsuit works. Now this works for quite a lot of different temperatures, and you can go quite cold with really thick wetsuits. However, at one point it just becomes so cold that even the thickest wetsuit will not be enough. Now in this case, you want to focus on a dry suit. A dry suit is a suit that completely keeps you dry inside. So no water will enter your dry suit. It's actually a little bit tricky to scuba dive with a dry suit if you've never done it. So if you're used to diving without wetsuits or with wetsuits, and now you're going into water that's really cold, then don't just get a dry suit yourself and go scuba diving in it. It doesn't matter how much experience you have. So you first have to learn how to scuba dive with a dry suit. So ask your instructor for more information about that. And then the last option is a skin suit, or most people know it as what we call a rash guard. So what is a rash guard then? Well, let me wear one right now. Okay, so this is a rash guard that I'm wearing right now. As you can see, it's really nice and thin. So it doesn't offer a lot of protection from colder water, but if you're diving in really warm water, then this is actually really nice to wear. It's very comfortable, and it's much more easier to move around to the water and to do things. So I absolutely love rash guards. That's why if you check my videos, you actually see me wearing a rash guard on most of my videos. That's just because I'm usually diving in very nice, warm, tropical waters. So this is really nice to have. I always say that the thinner the suit, the easier it is to move around under the water. But then again, you really need to get the proper exposure suit depending on the conditions that you're diving in. Otherwise, you might risk hypothermia. Which is you're super excited to go diving, you're on the dive boat or you're on the shore, and you just want to get ready. So you're putting on your wetsuit, and now you have to wait for people doing the dive briefing, or maybe going into the water because other people are before you, and you find out very quickly that it gets very, very warm in your wetsuit, and it even gets worse in your dry suit. Now, if it's now already a very warm day at exactly the same time, you can really risk overheating, or maybe at one point even worse. So make sure you really put on your wetsuit or your dry suit at the last possible moment, then gear up with your equipment, do your body check, and get into the water so you won't risk overheating. Alright, last question of the PADI Open Water Diver Manual answers of chapter number 4, which is 16. A cutting tool doesn't have to be a dive knife, it can be, but it can also be scissors or any other specially designed diving cutting tool. Cutting tools are something that we actually don't use that often when we are recreational scuba diving, but in unlikely events we might get entangled in, for example, a fishing line, or you might see a net or some garbage on a PADI aware conservation dive, and you want to remove that from the dive site without damaging the dive site. Then a cutting tool can be very, very handy. Now, especially in, for example, an emergency like being entangled in a fishing line, you want to be able to quickly reach it, and you want to be able to reach it with both hands, because if you're entangled in a way that your right hand can't reach it, your left hand should still be able to reach it. There's so many different cutting tools out there, so maybe after this you can ask your instructor for some advice which cutting tool is the best for you. In this video today, I want to go over the PADI Open Water Diver Manual answers of chapter number 3. I really hope that you liked it, and if you do, then please hit that like button, and also don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell so you're notified for any future training videos that I upload. Alright, let's get right into question number 1. A reference can be multiple different things. One of the most common references that we like to use under the water is a descent or ascent line. Now, during your PADI Open Water Diver course, you're going to be doing dive 1 and 2. And on both of these dives, you're going to be practicing going down using a reference line. They can also call this a descent or an ascent line. Now, if a line is not available because maybe you're doing a shore dive, then the sloping bottom contour is also a reference. So the bottom becomes a reference, as then you cannot follow a line. If you're using a line to make your descent, what's really good about a line is that first of all you can hold on to it. And when you're holding on to it, it really gives you a comfortable feeling that you're more in control of your descent. Because in the beginning you might be a little bit unexperienced with adjusting your buoyancy when you're going down, so you might sometimes go down a bit too fast, or you're not going down at all. And in this case, by holding onto the line, you feel like you're more in control because you can actually pull yourself down on the line or back up again if needed. That doesn't mean that you have to pull yourself all the way down to the bottom. You still need to deflate your BCD, exhale to make your lungs smaller. That's when you're descending, but holding onto the line will help a lot in control. Especially under your descent, when you might have some issues with your ears, or you are not so experienced in equalizing your ears yet, holding onto the line can really help to trying to find that perfect moment for you to equalize. Another thing that really is nice about a reference line is that you instantly know which way is up and down. Especially if the dive site or the bottom is quite deep, and it doesn't mean you're going deep, you still might go to 12 meters or 18 meters, but the bottom can be a little bit more deeper. So by having that line can really help you to know which way is up and down, so to avoid further go. Another reason why we like to follow a descent line, a lot of people, is just because they feel so much more comfortable knowing where they are because they have that visual reference. Alright, the sloping bottom contour is also very handy to follow, and it's very easy as well to make your descent using a sloping bottom contour. I don't know on your first dive what you're going to be using, the line or the sloping bottom contour, but both are fantastic. Sometimes in real life, after you're certified and you're going to be scuba diving, you might not always have a reference. In the beginning, you can still make what we call a free descent with no reference, and you will be practicing this during your open water course as well. Just ask your instructor for more information. Alright guys, let's move on to the second question of the PADI Open Water Diver Manual answers chapter number 3. It's very important to dive in areas where there's no current or a mild current. Now, if there is a bit of a mild current, then why is it better to go against it in the beginning and then go with it halfway during the dive? Is because in the beginning of the dive, you have lots of energy. which means that it's a little bit easier to go against that mild current or to swim into that mild current. Also, you use a little bit more air when you're going against the current, but that's okay because now we're doing that in the beginning of the dive. So half of the dive, you're gonna turn around, and now the last part, going back to the boat, is much easier because now the current is behind you and it's gonna help you to push you towards that boat. So it's easier to swim, you lose less energy, and you might be a little bit tired right now already because you have been diving for half of the dive time. So it's much more nicer in the end to have it easy than to have it harder and having to fight the current in the end. And that's why we always go into the current in the beginning of the dive and with the current in the end of the dive. Alright, sometimes when we're scuba diving under the water, we can get a little bit disorientated, or we might get very distracted of a beautiful fish or any other aquatic life that you see, you're following it, and you might get a little bit lost. There might also be a little bit of a current at the same time, which might be pushing you away from the boat in this case. Alright, in the end of the dive, you go up to the surface and you realize when you get up on the surface that you're actually quite far away from the boat. And now there's a little bit of a current maybe present on the surface as well. So it's hard for you maybe to get back to the boat. So what should we do? Swimming against the current is going to be really hard. And remember, this is also the end of your dive, so it might use too much energy. So what we recommend you to do when you're on the surface and there is a current, swim across the current. So you're kind of going from left to right, parallel to the current, getting closer and closer and closer to the boat. This might take a little bit longer, but it's much more easier, uses less energy, and less likely you will get into trouble. Alright, when you get to the back of the boat, then most boats, they will have what we call a trail line or a current line, which is really cool because it's kind of like a big buoyant round ball with a line attached to it, and they throw this behind the boat. So when you get to that point, you can hold on to that line, and then you can pull yourself towards the boat. And also the people on the boat can pull in the trail line as well, which makes it much more easier for you to do the last bit to get back to the boat. If it's not possible to swim across the current, then what you should do is to make sure that you're fully buoyant and that you just signal the boat for help, and then the boat will come and pick you up. And then if there's a trail line, when the boat passes, you can hold on to that. They stop, and then again, you can pull yourself in and the boat can help you to pull in the trail line as well. So there's multiple different ways to deal with a situation where a surface current is viewed too strong to get back to the boat. There's so much life under you. It's absolutely incredible, especially when you visit some of these beautiful tropical reefs. It's incredible how much diversity is there. And the aquatic life is extremely delicate. Sometimes it plays a little bit of tricks on us because some of the corals, it almost looks like pieces of wood, but it's an absolute living organism, and some of it is extremely soft as well. So even by touching it slightly, you can already break off a little piece and that can die. Some of these corals are very well connected to other corals, and there's a very important balance between a lot of species. So by breaking off even a small piece of coral can affect a very large area, or even some of the fish that was relying on a little bit of coral as well. So it's very important to keep everything alive so not only you can enjoy it, but future generations as well. So especially if you're on a sandy bottom, if you don't have really good buoyancy and you're accidentally touching it or kicking into the bottom, you're going to stir up all that sand, or in some cases even mud, which is really bad. With mud, sometimes even just a slight little tap can poof, just completely put visibility down to zero. And not only can you not see anything, it might actually be a bit of a scary moment, and also you're ruining the dive site for other divers. Even in sand or mud, there can also be living lots of beautiful aquatic creatures, and you don't want to hurt or kill them as well. So in other words, please stay off the bottom to not stir it up. So we just said that we shouldn't touch it because we want to make sure that the aquatic life doesn't get injured, or you get injured as well. Some of the aquatic life is actually poisonous, so we have to be very careful touching it. Not in all cases you would know if it's poisonous, especially not if you're a beginner diver, so we have to be careful of that. Some of the aquatic life likes to hide or bury themselves into the sand. So even if you think an area is clear, there might be a little stingray just hidden under the sand or a scorpion fish. That's why it's very important that we never ever touch the bottom. Now sometimes people know that this particular coral is 100% not poisonous, so they don't pay that much attention anymore by touching it. But even if the coral is not poisonous, it's in most cases razor sharp, so you can still get a cut. Now you're in the ocean and you get all these bacteria in there, and that can get infected very quickly afterwards as well. So never ever touch the bottom or touch any aquatic life, because we don't want to hurt ourselves, we don't want to hurt aquatic life, and we don't want to stir up the sand and create bad visibility for you or any other diver. Now, if you want to learn a little bit more about how to control your buoyancy better, then check out some of my other videos on this channel, where I'm showing in detail how to get the perfect buoyancy by using your lungs and adjusting little bits of air in your BCD. So check out the video section, or just go to the search bar and type in buoyancy with my channel's name. Now, you might be watching this going, anxiety, come on, why is this so scary? I even did my confined session this morning and it was so much fun, it was not scary at all. I understand, but you might get that moment a little bit later. A lot of scuba divers though, they already have anxiety, especially in the beginning of the PADI Open Water Diver course. So if you're watching this video right now and you're nervous of your first confined water dive experience, or you just did your confined water dive recently and you actually noticed that it was a little bit scary for you, or while doing certain skills, then it's extremely important to understand that you're absolutely not alone, and this is very normal. And it doesn't mean you always have to quit instantly, because we can really overcome our fears by just doing it more often. To be honest, I didn't really like some parts of scuba diving as well in the beginning, and then I just kept going. I told my instructors, I told my dive masters, they took better care of me, they gave me some really cool tips, and I just got better and better and better, to the point that I absolutely loved it, to the point that I actually now wanted to teach and help other people to overcome their fears as a PADI instructor. In other words, it is perfectly normal, but don't keep it to yourself and just push yourself through it, because that might lead to a panic moment at one point. So in the end, just when you're very nervous or you have anxiety, just go up to your PADI instructor, go up to your PADI dive master or dive leader and tell them this. Have a chat before the dive and then decide if you should continue with that dive, yes or no. And sometimes the leaders might say, don't worry about it, just give it a try, I'll stay close to you, we're not going to go so deep. But if you still feel that you really don't want to do it, then don't do it. It's supposed to be fun as well. In the end, it's your own responsibility, so don't let anybody force you to do something that you don't want. If you do decide to do it, then make sure you do baby steps and make sure you stay really close to your leader and tell them at any time during the dive if you're not okay and that you want to go up or end the dive, and they will end the dive with you. Okay, so this is very important. If you had a bit of nerves and you did overcome them and you did like how your diving instructor or dive master handled it, and you're like me thinking, oh, you know what, maybe I want to teach scuba diving as well, and I would like to help other people that might feel anxious also, then please check below in the description for a link how you get in contact with me and how you can join my PADI Dive Master or PADI Diving Instructor course. And then one day you can also help other people overcoming their fears and enjoy scuba diving. They're all very long questions in this PADI Open Water Diver Manual Answers of Chapter 3. Anytime that you're going to a new dive location, you should do a proper local orientation before you go scuba diving. Let's say, for example, you have done your course in location X, you've done your follow-up course in location Y, and now you are certified with 2 PADI courses, open water and advanced, and now you decide to travel to location B and now do a fun dive there as a certified diver. You see some water, so you go like, oh, you know what, let's rent some dive equipment, walk off the beach and enjoy scuba diving. But now a lot of things can go wrong. Why? It's because you don't know anything about that environment. There might be very strong currents, there might be very big different tides, so it's very hard for you maybe to not only enter the water or return. There might be some aquatic life that you don't want to see or that you really want to see and it's not there. So the list goes on and on why you should never go into any water without doing a proper local orientation. And what this means, you just go to a local PADI dive center and then you're gonna have a PADI professional. They sit down with you with usually a map of the dive site with maybe one of these guys again, one of these little slates with fish, or they have maybe a fish book. And they just run you through how you should navigate through the dive site, where some really cool points of interest will be, hopefully to point out some cool aquatic life that you have a chance of seeing, and maybe some areas to avoid where there might be some strong currents or maybe some dangerous or poisonous aquatic life, maybe avoid certain caves or things like that. So a proper local orientation is really, really, really handy. Now, if you don't feel comfortable, even when you're certified to go diving with a buddy that you don't know, then we highly recommend you to sign up for a Discover Local Diving experience, or we call it an organized fun dive with a PADI dive shop, where you're going to get a PADI dive master or PADI instructor or higher that will guide you and lead you around the dive site, usually with a group of other people or maybe together just with your leader. So there's different ways for you to enjoy scuba diving. But always do a proper local orientation before you go to a new dive location. So for example, after this PADI Open Water Diver course, you're going to get a PADI Open Water Diver certification that tells you that you can dive up to a depth of 18 meters in the conditions that you have been trained for. So now you're planning to do a fun dive with another PADI Open Water Diver in a completely new location. You did do a proper orientation and then you're going to go into the water. The water conditions are super nice. It's crystal clear, it's not too deep, there's no strong currents, and then suddenly you encounter a wreck. How cool is that? You're swimming around the wreck a little bit and then you have a door, you go like, oh, what's inside? And you have a look inside of the wreck. And now suddenly you touch the side of the wreck, the wall, you maybe get a little cut, it hurts, you're trying to go up, but there's a ceiling and you can see suddenly now you're in a very bad situation. And why? Is because you enter the wreck without a proper training and experience to do so. So in this case, you might go like, yeah, well, why would you go into a wreck if you don't have the training? Well, like I just said, the conditions were perfect, it's beautiful. The wreck doesn't show real danger straight away. It looks very safe. And then people decide to go in, but then because you haven't had that training, so the hazards were not obvious, you now get into trouble much quicker. So be careful with that. Another form of having hazards that are not always obvious are sometimes currents. You might get into a mild current and the current just gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and before you know it, there might be a down current, and then if you're on a dive site, let's say a wall, and it's very deep, it might actually drag you down, which is not a very good situation to be in as well. So again, by doing a proper local orientation, you might prevent this, and also by doing proper training like drift diving, you might recognize these areas a little bit faster to prevent yourself from going there in the first place. Having a false sense of security is related to that. So let's say what I just said, you're not experienced to go into wrecks yet, but because the conditions are so nice, you're swimming in there, and the more you're swimming in that wreck and the more everything is going well, the more you think that you don't need that training and you're going to be okay until something does go wrong within the wreck, and then you don't know how to handle yourself in that emergency. And the same counts for those currents. And that's the reason why we should stick to what we have learned so far. And if you do like to go to those areas, you should do extra courses and get the proper training. Go and ask your instructor for any information how to sign up for those courses. Now, the last thing then is it can also cause anxiety if you're going to these areas that you're not properly trained for or that you don't have any experiences in. So for example, you might swim around at wreck, everything looks beautiful again on the outside, it looks beautiful on the inside, so you go like, let's go in. But the moment you're in, you realize that you're actually claustrophobic. Maybe something that you didn't really realize that much on land. Now, because of that, you might get a bit of a panic attack, and again, you're inside of a wreck. So having a panic attack in a wreck with no experience, not a good idea. So don't push yourself, but if you are interested in that kind of diving, just get the proper training and then enjoy that amazing diving that is out there. Question number 8. It's an important one as well. There's just all these reasons sometimes why we don't feel comfortable to dive in a specific location, but sometimes our bodies, they are, especially if we're diving with bodies that we don't know. And in their mind, they're paying a lot of money, they want to go to this dive, and they're like, what? If you can't dive in those conditions, you shouldn't be a diver, so they're putting a lot of pressure on you as well. But again, everybody has been trained in different conditions, and that person might have been trained in those conditions and you haven't, so you might feel uncomfortable. Or even if you have, you feel uncomfortable. I mean, if you don't like to go in a high surf, are you not supposed to get certified now? Of course, you can still find locations where you don't have a high surf and still enjoy scuba diving. So just politely say, I'm really sorry, dude, but I don't feel, comfortable going in there. Can we just go to another location? And if your body doesn't like that, if your body goes like, well, no, you shouldn't do that, then that's it. Bye-bye, buddy, and never dive with that person again. There is a little bit of ego sometimes in this dive industry. Don't let it intimidate you. Trust me on this one. There is a lot of people that are brave, I think, enough to say, I'm sorry, I'm not ready for something, I want to do something a little bit more easier. And what I think is very cool on a personal level is that some of the best diving instructors in the world, the most experienced cave divers sometimes, or technical divers sometimes, a lot of people, they look up to them and they go like, oh, these guys, they've done it all. But these are actually the guys that always say, hey, if anybody in the team is not comfortable to do something, we just cancel the dive and there's always another dive, or we can move to another location. So don't think to be part of the big guys means that you have to force yourself to do something. The people that force you to do something you don't want are not big guys, I can tell you, and they shouldn't be in this dive industry at all. So first of all, to prevent any stings, any cuts, or any abrasions, is to just make sure you have really good buoyancy, never ever touch anything on the water, and you will never get injured. It's that simple. Now, if you do have to kneel or sit or stand on a bottom that we don't recommend, but maybe because, for example, you overexerted and it's just extremely important for you that you do that, then just make sure that it is a true sandy bottom so that not only you can not hurt yourself, but you also don't hurt any of the aquatic life that might be there. Now, to prevent this in general is try to hold on to your body anytime you're overexerted, and then you don't have to touch anything at all. Now, if you do accidentally touch aquatic life and you do get a small cut, or you might get a sting, you might get stung by something a little bit poisonous, but it's not too bad yet, then you can apply first aid when you get back to the boat. And there's different methods of first aids depending on the aquatic life that touched or stung you or cut you in this case. You learn a lot more about that in your PADI Rescue Diver course, which is such a cool course, very fun, super rewarding. Check with your instructor if you like to do your PADI Rescue Diver course. But for now, it's important to know that we can do a lot of first aid if something does happen in the unlikely event. Now, anytime you do get caught or stung by aquatic life and you do first aid, it is important that when you get back that you do go to a dive doctor or any physician and just double check and do a proper medical checkup just to make sure that you're okay to go for your other dive. If it is more serious, so you got, for example, stung by a much more poisonous aquatic animal, then it's very important to do the right procedures by getting back to the boat. In some cases, maybe doing CPR and then alert EMS and get the evacuation going. So besides touching it, another way to prevent not being injured by aquatic life is to not annoy it. And treat all organisms with respect. I have seen some people, some instructors, some dive leaders trying to get a triggerfish to get more excited and they poke like fins in their face. Would you like it if you get a fin in your face? Of course not. So these animals, they get aggressive and they start attacking the person that is doing that to them. If you pick up stuff, then of course you're just going to risk one of those aquatic life organisms to just turn around and go, hey dude, you're picking me up, and they do something bad to you. I mean, I've literally seen some of my students with their arms in holes going, oh, what's in there? You know, think about it. Let's say you're sitting on your couch watching Netflix and then suddenly this giant hand comes into the window and starts poking around. I mean, what would you do, right? You probably bite that finger as well. In other words, it's very important. Don't touch, don't stick your hand into things you don't know what's in there, and don't start harassing aquatic life because it's just going to turn around. And what is very sad is that sometimes people go, yeah, but I know this turtle's never going to bite me, and they're holding the shield. Hey, how would you feel if somebody jumped on top of you? It's not nice in general to disturb any of those beautiful organisms. So don't touch, just watch. And then we got some people that say, well, if I wear a proper exposure suit, then it's okay to touch things like, for example, gloves. No, it's not, because again, you can hurt the aquatic life and some of these things can go right through your wetsuit. I do have to admit though, is that an exposure suit does prevent you from having certain cuts and stings. So if you accidentally touch something with an exposure suit, it's definitely better than without an exposure suit. But wearing an exposure suit or especially gloves is not a free ticket for you to start touching things. Important. All right, question number 10. Yeah, so first thing you do when you get to the surface always is to fully inflate your BCD, and then you hear the air escaping from your jacket, then you know it's fully inflated. Once you're fully buoyant, then swim perpendicular either way until you get to an area where the current is less strong, and then try to swim back to shore. In a lot of cases, the rip current is very strong and it's hard to get out. In this case, start signaling for help like this, or with one hand like this. Inflate your SMB, which is a big long balloon that we carry with us. It looks like this when it's rolled up, but when you unroll it, it's a big long balloon, and then you can move that around as well on the surface to show to people that you are in trouble, and they will come and pick you up. To be honest, you shouldn't really be in a rip current in the first place, as they can be that dangerous. So again, do always a proper local orientation before you go to a dive area, and then probably people will tell you to avoid a certain area because there's rip currents. However, in the unlikely event, it can always happen without all the preparation that you've done, and in this case, do the technique that I just told you. So tides are caused by the attraction of the moon and the sun. And because they are moving around, tides also change depending on the time of the day. In some areas, they hardly change, so nobody really cares about it. Or they might change a little bit depending on certain times, and then we can sort of plan our dives around those times. But in some areas, the tides are extremely big and have huge changes, which not only makes it hard to maybe get into the water whenever you want, but even worse, trying to get out of the water in the end of the dive. And a lot of us have come in these situations that, for example, in tropical areas, if the tide becomes so low, then you find yourself almost getting stuck with the reef. And we don't want to damage the reef, we don't want to hurt ourselves. So you're on the surface and you just can't get back to shore. So timing is very important when you go scuba diving in an area with big tide changes. And to know these times, again, just do a local orientation before the dive, and the professionals there will tell you exactly when it is safe for you to go scuba diving in that particular area. Yes, we like to call this a dive roster. When you book a scuba diving experience on a boat, then on the boat they have this big roster hanging like a whiteboard somewhere on the boat, and they have it on a piece of paper, on a clipboard. And there's different techniques of how to manage this roster, but a common one is that they get all the fun divers, basically all the divers on the boat together, and they will give this roster to each and every one of them, and then they have to fill in some details like their names, who they're going to be diving with, their time in, their time out, how much air they have in the tank, how much lead weight they're having. So there's lots of information on this roster, and when they come back, then they fill in again a checklist that they came back, how much air they had left, whether they went on the dive, all that kind of stuff, and that helps the dive master or the boat master to make sure that everybody came back. Same with the whiteboard, there's different ways of doing it, and people literally tick off their names when they come back on the boat. It's extremely rare for a dive organization to leave people on the dive site, and in those few cases that it did happen, usually it was with mismanagement of the dive roster or the role, so it's extremely important that we use it. If you dive with an organization that is not using this, then I highly recommend to not go scuba diving with them. Question number 13, and we are now halfway through the PADI Open Water Diver Manual Answers of chapter number 3. This is also the largest chapter of all the 5 chapters, so I'm happy that you're still here, and hopefully you're liking it, you're learning something, and if you do, please smash that like button. That will help me a lot. And if you have any questions so far, you can leave them in the comments below, and I will check every single comment and I will answer every single one of them. Alright, for now, let's have a go with question 13. In the dive industry, there's actually discussions from people going, the best entry is a giant stride. No, it's not. The best entry is a backwards roll. The best entry is going in the water with no equipment. And I always go like, why are all these guys having these discussions, as there is no standard for the best entry? It is basically the easiest one, the most comfortable one, and the most safest one for the water conditions that you're going to be scuba diving in. Not just water conditions, to be honest, also your personal preferences as well. So for example, if you're diving from a large boat, then a giant stride can be really handy and nice to go into the water. It's very safe, it's very controlled, and a lot of people love this entry. But you might feel a bit uncomfortable doing this, big step from that height. Then you might go, should I now go backwards? No, you can't, because it's too high. So now what you can do, you can literally go maybe from the back of the boat, use the ladder to go into the water, and then they will hand you your diving equipment from the boat, and then in the water you're putting it on. So you just have to sometimes adjust to the situation that you're in. When you're diving from a very small boat, let's say a dinghy or maybe a longtail boat, then it's hard to do a giant stride. So in this case, a backward roll is a really good entry. It's actually really fun to do it as well. I really like it. Some people, they don't like it so much. So again, just go into the water. They give you your equipment, you put it on into the water. So again, there's different situations. Maybe it's a little bit choppy, and then a certain entry might be better than another entry as well. When you're scuba diving and you notice the bottom of a boat and the propeller in the back and it's spinning, it's almost instantly reaction to stay away from that. But if it's not moving around, then it gives that false sense of security. And we do sometimes see people getting very close to propellers of boats, thinking that they won't start a boat because people assume that they're scuba divers under the water. But I have seen over and over again that captains do suddenly start their engines, and then the propellers, they start moving, and this can cause serious injuries. So whenever you see the bottom of a boat, always stay far away from it, especially the propeller. And even if the propeller is not moving, make sure you have a big distance just in case it starts to move. What this line does is that if there's a bit of a surface current in the beginning, then if you go against it and it's too strong, you're going to lose lots and lots and lots of energy. When you get to the starting point and the mooring line and you're trying to descend, you're now already might be exhausted, you might lose a lot of air in your descent, or you might feel very uncomfortable. So having that line on the side of the boat, you can easily use that to pull yourself to the front of the boat, to the mooring line or descent line, and then continue your dive. An extra tip is whatever you choose to do before you descend, always catch your breath. Take a couple of really nice long deep breaths in. Make sure you feel really calm and then signal to your bodies it's okay to go down, and then start your 5-point descent. This is very unlikely, but you might get lost on the dive site. You might have been following aquatic life, not realizing that you got far away from the dive site. There might have been a current. There is a few reasons to end up on the surface too far away from the boat, or no boat in sight at all, or not even ashore, so you're kind of in open water. I know this feels a little bit uncomfortable if this happens to you for the first time, but just remember that you have this BCD, which is an amazing jacket that you can fully inflate with air, so you're extremely buoyant. Then stay close to your buddy, so you're together, or with your buddies if you're with a group, and then use your signaling devices to get the attention from the people that are looking for you. One of the signaling devices you can use is a DSNB. Now here I got one, and this is like a balloon that we carry with us, clipped onto our BCD anywhere, or maybe in our pockets, and you can unroll it so it becomes a long thin tube. You can inflate that, and on the surface you can move it around so people can see this from a big distance. You can check it on one of the videos that I'm putting on the screen right now, how that works. Another thing that you can use is maybe your whistle. So when you're buying a brand new BCD, it usually comes with a whistle, and if not, then you can purchase a whistle. It's very cheap. These whistles are very handy on the surface to make a very loud noise for anyone that is looking for you. You can even extend on that and get one of those flashlights that you can attach to your BCD, so you have a super bright light flashing. And there's even a couple of other devices that you can use as well. Most people, they use a DSNB and a whistle, but if you want to have more signaling devices, then go to your local retail shop or ask your instructor for the options for you to purchase. So during this PADI Open Water Diver course, you're learning to avoid some situations to not get injured in the first place. And if you do get into any problems, then how to handle those problems, and afterwards how to deal with the situation in an emergency. However, if you want to get even better in preventing and handling these situations or potential emergencies under the water, then I highly recommend, I can't say it enough, take your PADI Rescue Diver course. You can't go there straight from your Open Water Diver course, but you can do your PADI Advanced course after your PADI Open Water Diver course, and then you can continue with your PADI Rescue Diver course. If you're not sure if you really want to do this PADI Rescue Diver course, then ask your instructor if he can give you an introduction to the PADI Rescue Diver course in the PADI Advanced course. Then again, I say it's a no-brainer, because not only is the PADI Rescue Diver course a lot of fun, but it's extremely rewarding knowing after you're certified and you're much more capable handling these emergency situations and other people around you, especially when you're scuba diving a lot. So now you can add on to that with your PADI Emergency Oxygen Provider course, which goes into depth in how to give people 100% oxygen in case of maybe a lung overexpansion injury or decompression illness. And then finally, you got the EFR course, or the Emergency First Response Primary and Secondary Care. And this course is not just good as a scuba diver, but you can use this for any emergency on land as well. So it's a fantastic course, and most people actually get this combined with the PADI Rescue Diver course. So if you're interested in any of these 3 courses, go and check with your instructor, and he will give you a lot of information how you can sign up for it. Anytime you reach the surface, problem or not, the first thing that you do, keep your rag in, keep your mask on, and fully inflate that BCD until the air escapes from your exhaust valves. You're like a balloon, you cannot go anywhere. It's absolutely fantastic. It calms you down, you can rest, and it's much more easier for other people to help you too. But definitely if you're in trouble or in an emergency, so at least you want to make sure that you fully inflate your BCD so you can't sink back down anymore. Now, another way to increase positive buoyancy at the surface is to drop your weight system. If you have a weight belt, just unbuckle it and drop it. And if you have integrated weights, use the quick release mechanism on the side, pull them out and then drop it next to you. Now, together with being fully inflated, you're extremely buoyant, which will make handling any problems at the surface much more easier. What's happening is that you're encountering a panic diver at the surface, and this person is usually out of control. They don't listen and react to any of your questions or commands. They usually are moving very fast on the surface in a panic mode. Their mask is usually completely off, or it's half hanging on their head because they don't like anything on their face, so they just get that off straight away. They don't usually inflate their BCD that well, so with their weights on, they're very negatively buoyant, so it's hard for them to stay on the surface, so they keep kicking and kicking and kicking, and that wears them out as well. And they're just in panic, so their eyes are usually very wide, and they're just not listening to anything that you're saying. So what's the most important thing right now to do is to get them buoyant. Now, to get them buoyant, there's different ways of doing that. You can do an around approach or an on the water approach. And then what you do, you can grab them, you can fully inflate them, make sure you're still fully inflated yourself, and then help them to release their weight system. And once they get more buoyant, in most cases, they calm down significantly, and then you can communicate with them. If you want to learn more about how to handle this situation, you're definitely going to practice this a lot during your PADI Diver Rescue course. It's extremely rare, and it might never happen to you, and hopefully it will never happen to you. But you might be scuba diving under the water and you might encounter an unresponsive other diver under the water. How should you handle the situation? So first of all, what you want to do is to make sure that the diver is truly unresponsive and is not just very quietly looking at some fish or at some coral. So you give him a little shake, and then if you know for sure that that person is not responsive, then make sure that you lift up their airway, keep their regulator in their mouth if they still have it in their mouth, and then use their BCD and your own if needed to control the buoyancy by inflating it a little bit, maybe deflating it if needed, but to get the buoyancy going, and then do a controlled and slow ascent to the surface with that person. Again, this is a skill that you're learning in your PADI Rescue Diver course, and it's the PADI Rescue Diver exercise number 6. If you want to learn more about this skill, you can check the video section and go for the PADI Rescue Diver skills, and then go for number 6, where in detail I'll show you how to perform this skill correctly. Now, once you get to the surface, Make sure you fully inflate the victim, fully inflate yourself, remove the weight system from the victim, from yourself, remove the mask from the victim again and from yourself. Then you can open up the airway and do a check to make sure that the victim is breathing, and if they're not breathing, signal the boat for help, update them that you have an unresponsive, no breathing diver, and then start providing rescue breaths while towing the person back to the boat. At the boat, you perform CPR, alert EMS, and then once EMS arrives, they take over from you. You can see that if you have been watching the PADI Open Water Manual answers of chapter 1 and 2, that this question just keeps coming back. It is such an important question, as if you can prevent the situation from happening or know how to handle it the right way, you can solve many other problems down. So again, you're scuba diving, you might end up in a current that's too strong. Now you might use too much energy. It's very stressed, or maybe it gets very cold, or you're getting lost, or the visibility is not so nice, or whatever the reason is. You're just using more and more energy, so you're breathing more and more, and you start breathing very shallow. Remember that airspace that we have, so the shallower we breathe, the more it becomes uncontrollable, to the point you just think that you're not getting any air anymore, and then you start to panic, and then you might want to bolt. To prevent this, to make sure that we always dive relaxed, never find yourself in a stressful situation, and if you do and you feel that you start to breathe like that, just stop straight away, maybe hold onto your body and rest and catch your breath. Slow, long, deep breaths in and out will calm you down quite quickly. Once you calm down, you can decide to continue your dive, or maybe just say, let's cancel this and let's go up and just do another dive. Question number 22 of this PADI Open Water Diver Manual answers chapter number 3. It is the call first approach. The reason why is because then emergency services will go on their way, and in the time it takes them to get to you, then you can still help the victim with more CPR or any other first aid that might be required. In the end, they need to get to a proper physician as fast as possible, as they can truly help them. Our role is to provide any primary or secondary care until EMS arrives. Another great thing about contacting EMS as fast as possible is that they can give us advice what to do on the phone or any other way that you are in contact with them. Especially these days, we all have smartphones. There's a video function on it, so we can even show them on video what is happening. So whatever you do, make sure you contact them first after you check for breathing and provided any CPR as needed. Alright guys, I hope that you're liking it so far, and don't forget to smash that like button if you do. It helps me a lot. But also you can actually click on the join button below this video, and then you can become a member of this channel, and you can get some really cool perks in return for a small donation to this channel, which will help me to produce more content for you. So that will be the biggest thank you can ever give me. So have a look by clicking the join button under this video. Alright, we're almost there, and we almost finished this PADI Open Water Diver Manual answers of chapter number 3. So let's have a look at question number 23. Running out of air should never happen to you. It is extremely rare, and I have met thousands, tens of thousands of divers around the world, and almost no one has ever run out of air. It's extremely rare to run out of air if you're following all the proper rules and procedures that you are learning in the PADI courses. On us, we have what we call an SPG, or submergible pressure gauge. And what it is basically an air gauge that tells us with a needle how much air do we have left in our scuba cylinder. On most of these gauges, when you reach 50 bar, which is still in most cases a quarter of the air in a scuba cylinder, it is time for people to go up. Now, when I teach scuba diving, I actually teach my students to already start going up at around 70 bar, which means that when they reach the surface, they have lots and lots of spare air left. Sometimes, in very rare occasions, this might go wrong. Maybe because the SPG is broken. Maybe because you didn't do a good body check. Maybe the tank hasn't been filled up to the max. Maybe you're diving with a dive organization that doesn't switch tanks in between the dives. Maybe you are under the water and there was a strong current, or you were very excited, or you were just so busy with your camera that you forgot to watch your SPG. So there's a lot of reasons why in the unlikely event someone can run out of air. Now, normally if you run out of air, your body is right next to you, so you can just tap your body, take his or her alternate air source, and then make a very safe and controlled ascent to the surface. But if in this case your body is too far away from you, it says here 12 meters away, and you're not too deep, so up to a depth in this case of 10 meters, then you can still make a controlled ascent to the surface by doing the CISA or the controlled emergency swimming ascent. What you do, you take your final breath from your regulator, make sure that you're in ascent position, and then start to swim up slowly, not faster than 80 meters per minute, while making a continuous sound. The ah sound works really well. Ah, so like this. Ah, slowly swimming to the surface. Now, why it's important to make that sound is because if we run out of air, then remember you can never ever hold your breath under the water, otherwise your area lungs will expand to the point you might hurt your lungs. So by exhaling, now we're actually releasing that expanding air from our lungs to prevent any injuries. Now, why do we make a ah sound or any sound, or not just blow out? That's because when you make a sound, it's much more easier to control it, as we're trying to do it as gently as possible to make sure that we reach that surface. So when we reach the surface with the CISA, keep swimming strongly to stay on the surface. Keep your mask on, take your regulator out. We can't use the button right now to automatically inflate the BCD because there's no air. So manually or orally inflate that BCD. While kicking your legs until it's fully inflated. If you need to afterwards, you can still drop your weight system, and if it's not needed, you can keep it on. So like I said, we're not dive physicians, so it's very important that anything that has happened, especially when you're in doubt, that you always check yourself up with a proper physician or dive physician just before you plan another scuba dive. An example of this, for example, is when somebody had a near drowning experience and they swallowed a lot of water, and then the water did came out when they got to the surface, thinking that they're okay, but there might still be a little bit of water left in the lungs, and that can damage the lungs over time. So it's really important to go to a physician, and they will do a proper checkup of your lungs, making sure that all the water is clear and there's no damage up to that point. In other words, always check with a physician first. Now, in the previous questions, we already discussed the signaling devices. First, you should have a DSMB balloon that you can inflate under the water when you're shallow with a rope to the surface, letting boats know that you're very shallow, or at the surface in case you might need to get the attention of the boat or shore that you might need some help. Another signaling device was that whistle to get people's attention on the surface, or what you can maybe use is like a big strobe, like a big light or an air horn or any other signaling device that you might like to add onto your diving equipment. Last question, number 26. A dive flag is a flag that is usually attached to a balloon or a big buoy, at the surface, letting other boats know from a distance that there's divers under the water or shallow to the water. This buoy is now attached to a line that you attached on the surface. Now, a lot of captains are very well trained and they avoid these dive flags. But there are different reasons why a captain might not see or recognize your dive flag. So never assume that when you have your dive flag up that everything is safe. Definitely always try to listen under the water, and if you hear a boat engine, and especially when it's coming closer, then don't take any chances and just stay deep enough until that boat passes again, and now you can continue your ascent and going back up to the surface. It happened to me a few times, and the boat captain was just distracted and he passed like a meter away from my dive flag. So I really realized on the water, these things can really happen. So again, safety is also your responsibility. So make sure you stay deep enough until the boat passes. In this video today, we're going to focus on the PADI Open Water Diver Manual answers of chapter number 4. So let's dive right into it. Let's have a look at question number 1. Over here, I have what we call a mesh bag. These bags are specifically designed to take under the water when scuba diving, and you can easily fold them up, roll them up, put them into your beastie pocket. And then whenever you encounter some trash on your dive, then you can take it out and put the trash into this bag. Sometimes the dive site can be very polluted and there can be trash everywhere. It's very handy to have this with you on every dive so you can collect it, but it's also very good if you sign up for these special PADI aware cleanup dives. And those dives specifically designed when you go with a group and you're just going to clean a specific dive site, reef, beach, or anything that's related to it. Absolutely, we should always hold these in our hands. Now the reason why is because when you keep collecting garbage in these bags, at one point it might get a little bit heavy, or there might even be some sharp items in there. So if you have this clipped onto your BCD or anywhere else, you might now get entangled, or if you want to let it go quickly, you can't. So we always recommend hold it in your hand, and anytime you do have to let go in that unlikely event, you can just drop it and then you can always recover it later. Now, most people, when they have a fever and when they're really sick, they choose not to go scuba diving. But we all have a little bit of congestion here and there. Maybe a tiny little cold. And especially if you've already tried out a scuba dive with a very small cold and it was okay, then you're more likely to do it again. But this is really bad. And the reason why is because that congestion can block your sinuses or your air spaces in your body, and now it becomes really hard to equalize, or even at one point impossible. This can cause squeezes, this can cause reverse blocks, or even worse. So for this reason we say, even if you have the slightest cold, just drink a lot of water, stay at home and rest until you feel better so you can continue your next dive. Now, in the end, we're not doctors. I'm not a doctor. So to be really sure, we always recommend you to do a proper medical checkup with a physician just to make sure that you're fully recovered to safely do your next dive. Remember the PADI slogan, the way the world learns to dive. PADI is a fantastic diving organization that created these programs that fits a lot of different kinds of people around the world, making scuba diving much more accessible to a wider public. However, there are some exceptions, and sadly, scuba diving is just not for everyone. You need to have a certain medical fitness to be able to go scuba diving. In the end, it's not just being weightless on the water and looking at a fish. We need to walk around with equipment on land. The dive equipment can be quite heavy. You need to get into the water and out of the water. If you are diving from a boat or you're in a swimming pool, you might use that ladder. And again, that equipment can be really heavy climbing up and down. Like the question says, we're wearing sometimes exposure suits and they can get very warm very quickly on land, especially in very hot climates. Then under the water, you might have a current that you might have to swim against. Again, we're always trying to avoid these currents, but sometimes they can just sneak up on you, and you do need a certain fitness to be able to handle yourself in that situation. So any of these reasons or all of them combined, if you now already have underlying health problems, sometimes you don't even know, maybe you have a weak heart, then this can cause serious issues. So if you know already that maybe you have an underlying health problem, especially related to the heart, then I highly recommend you don't just go scuba diving, but go and check yourself out with a proper doctor, a specialist, or a dive physician, just to make sure that you're fit enough to go scuba diving. Question number 4, the all-time favorite of our PADI Open Water Diver students. Now you might go like, what? Come on, where's the fun in that? And I'm on holiday, I only have a few days, I want to have a drink in the evening and then the next day scuba diving. And you know, in the end, I'm not your parents, you know, I'm not the government, I'm not a doctor. And can I say to you guys you shouldn't drink or smoke at all? I mean, that's hard. Anything in life, when we do in moderation, it can be okay. But we need to be so careful with scuba diving. And I know you're on holiday, I know you want to have a good time, but it can cause big problems. For example, if you decide to drink alcohol before and also after the dive, it dehydrates you a lot. And then when we are scuba diving, we need to be extremely hydrated. Also remember that we're under pressure, that we have nitrogen being absorbed and released constantly in our bloodstream and tissues. And if you're very dehydrated, that can cause problems and maybe lead to decompression sickness as well down the road. And where it becomes a difficult thing for us is that we can't say, all right, you can drink, let's say, 2 beers and you're fine. Or you can drink a maximum of 4 of this and you're fine. Because we just don't know. It really depends on the person itself. It depends on how healthy you are, how much you've slept, your tolerance to any alcohol. And you know, there's so many factors that we just don't know, that we just recommend you just try, to be honest, not to drink and not to smoke at all, at least a day before you go scuba diving. And trust me, you feel the difference. Like when you under the water, you enjoy it so much more. And then if you then come back from the dive, maybe wait a day and then have some fun again if you want to. How many times I had people canceling because they went out the night before without me knowing it, and they drank a lot and they said, oh, I'm so hungover, I can't do this dive today, I'm so sorry, and we have to cancel the course because now we have to fly out. Not only do you feel really sick because you're hungover, second, you missed out on some of the coolest experiences and memories in your life, which is scuba diving, just for something that you can do all the time and cost you a lot of money as well. So just let it go for a little bit and just enjoy scuba diving. That's my recommendation. And if you really want to have that drink, hey, have a drink the night before during dinner or something like that, but just one of them, and then a good night of sleep, and the next day you're gonna have a great day. But whatever you do, make sure you never ever drink just before the dive, in the morning or anything like that, and have a good night of sleep before you go scuba diving. That's really important. Now, besides feeling dehydrated or being dehydrated, alcohol can also cause disorientation. And especially when you're intoxicated and you go scuba diving, this can cause really big problems. Like maybe you're not checking your air anymore, not often enough. You might not really care about checking, your body and all these things. So you have to be sober to enjoy this sport. Okay, now for smoking then, smoking is just bad in general. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I don't want to be the guy saying, oh, smoking is bad, I'm not all-knowing. I've also made my mistakes in life, and a long time ago I smoked as well, but I'm very happy that I quit that, and especially as a diving instructor, it changed my life. It changed my career. It changed my enjoyment. We're under the water. We're breathing under the pressure. We need super strong, healthy lungs. So of course, when we smoke, that's not really good for your lungs. And the moment I stopped smoking as well, I instantly saw that my air consumption improved. So if your air consumption is not so good and you feel bad about that, then stop smoking. It's going to make a huge difference. I know it's not always easy. Definitely try it. And if you don't smoke yet, then don't smoke. Trust me. Now, besides getting a better air consumption and just generally feeling better. If you smoke, it also really affects your circulatory system. Blood is going around, and all of this can cause major issues when we go scuba diving. I know you might have done a few dives maybe with some smoking and you go, oh, that was fine. I know, but trust me, it will catch up over time. So anyway, I know this is not what you want to hear, so let's move on to the next question. It's not just not taking medication, for example, for getting rid of your congestion. Because again, when you have a cold or a slight cold or any congestion, you shouldn't dive at all. But a lot of people are using medication regularly for different reasons. And some of this medication you might be able to go scuba diving with, but some of them might not. Some of them can cause extra side effects, or they can wear off under the water, which can cause problems with your health. So there's all these different reasons why some medication and scuba diving just don't mix well together. How do you know for sure? Go and check yourself up with a doctor or a dive physician. Bring the medication with you and they can let you know if that medication is okay to go scuba diving with, or you might need to hold off, or you might not be able to do the scuba dive at all. Better safe than sorrow, and always check yourself up with a physician. Question number 6. Now, I know you're excited to go scuba diving. I know you're on holiday. I know you really want to do this, but you are expecting a child, or you don't know if you're expecting a child, but you might expect a child, so you might be pregnant. In all these cases, you shouldn't go scuba diving. And if you want to know really the reason why, well, so far what I know is that they're not 100% sure yet how it affects your pregnancy. And for that reason, they say, okay, just don't dive, because you don't really want to gamble with this one, do you? Of course, this is something that you can still talk about with your dive physician or any physician, but they will give you the same advice not to go scuba diving. Now, once the child has been born and you're fully recovered, then you definitely can go scuba diving again. So it's not like you can never scuba dive again, you just temporarily have to hold off to. Now, when can your child go scuba diving? Your child has to wait a little bit longer. It depends on what training organization you choose, but if you're gonna go for PADI, which I highly recommend, you have to wait until your child is 8 years old to do some really cool kids scuba diving programs like Bubble Maker. And if they are 10 years old, then they can already begin with the PADI Open Water Diver course, the same course that you are doing right now or are about to do. Anyway, let's move to question number 7. So guys, if you are liking this video so far and if it's helping you a lot, then please don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to ring that notification bell so you get a little notification every time I'm uploading a new scuba diving training video. Especially the sharing part, please copy and paste this link in your social media, and then hopefully it can help some other people also. Alright, let's get into question number 7. Okay, what is a scuba review? Well, first of all, the PADI scuba review is now called PADI Reactivate. So if you're a bit confused about why you can't maybe find some information online about the PADI scuba review, it's because you should search for PADI Reactivate. Now, what is it? It's basically a refresher course or refresher program from PADI that helps certified people to get back in the water again. So for example, let's say that you're completing your PADI Open Water Diver course. You have gotten your scuba diving certification, you might do 1 or 2 more fun dives on your holiday trip right now, and then you decide to go home. Alright, back home, holiday's finished, you go back to work, and then next year you're planning another holiday. You're going to a nice warm location, and woohoo, let's go scuba diving again. Yes, you do have that scuba diving certification that allows you to go diving anywhere around the world. However, after a year of no diving, are you still fresh enough with all the skills in your mind to safely do another scuba dive? Maybe yes, maybe no. I wouldn't take that risk. If you haven't dived for a certain time and we're recommending it, let's say 6 months, then you should always do a scuba refresher, which is called scuba review, which is also called a PADI reactivate, before you do your next scuba dive. And trust me, it is an absolutely fantastic program. It's worth gold. It's super easy. It doesn't take long. It's not expensive at all. And at the next PADI Dive Center, you're going to get a PADI Dive Master or PADI Diving Instructor who will run you through some of the skills that you're a little bit rusty with. And then when you feel comfortable again, then they can take you on that next fun dive, or maybe even a next course if you want to do another PADI course. So it's absolutely fantastic. You might run into some dive centers that say, we want you to do a scuba review or PADI reactivate all the time before another dive or course, even if you might have been diving last month. Well, it's their policy. So if you don't agree on that, you can always move to another dive center. But again, right, why not? Better safe than sorrow. Maybe you've already done thousands of dives and you haven't dived for 7 months. Do you really have to do a refresher course right now? Well, it depends. So I always recommend go to your PADI Dive Center, talk to the PADI professionals and ask them for advice if you should do this PADI reactivate, yes or no. I know that you are right now halfway through your PADI Open Water Diver course, or you're about to do your PADI Open Water Diver course. So what is this PADI Enriched Air Nitrox Diver? It sounds super cool, but is that a little bit far away from you guys? No, not at all. You should ask your instructor about this, but you can already get your PADI Enriched Air Diver certification together with your PADI Open Water Diver course. A lot of my students that I've taught love to do the PADI Open Water Dive course. Then they stayed and joined the PADI Advanced course. And then some of them, they included the PADI Enriched Air Nitrox Diver certification as well. So why is PADI Enriched Air then so popular? It's because when we are diving normally on air, so in our scuba cylinder, we have normal air. But it's not one gas. It's actually made out of multiple gases. A lot of multiple gases, but 2 of them are the biggest one, and that's oxygen and nitrogen. So to keep it easy, we say 21% of a scuba tank is oxygen and 79% is nitrogen. So when we go scuba diving, we're using the oxygen, we're metabolizing it, but the nitrogen gets absorbed into our tissues, and then later when we're making our ascent, it gets released from our tissues again and it escapes from our body. The reason why we can't always dive indefinitely under the water and we have these NDLs, no decompression limits, I know that all sounds very fancy, or maximum allowable times that we can scuba dive, is because of the nitrogen that we have in our tank, that we absorb in our body when we breathe from it, and the pressure that we're under. At one point we might risk decompression sickness, and that gives us that maximum dive time, and we have to go up before that time to make sure that we prevent decompression sickness. So when you're scuba diving on enriched air, we now lower the amount of nitrogen, which is awesome, and in return we get a bit more oxygen, and now we have less nitrogen, so we can extend our NDLs or maximum dive times at certain depths. So if you go to a place where there's a beautiful wreck at a certain depth, then you can maybe stay longer using the PADI Enriched Air Diver course or a nitrox tank on your back than maybe with your air cylinder. So it is super popular for that reason. Now, why don't we put you on PADI Enriched Air Nitrox straight away in your PADI Open Water course from Dive 1? The reason why is because you need a little bit of special training and some extra knowledge. Because remember what I just said, we lower the amount of nitrogen, which can make us dive a bit longer at certain depths, that's awesome, but in return we have to increase the oxygen a little bit. And that can maybe cause now some problems at specific depths under specific pressures, which can lead to oxygen toxicity. And oxygen toxicity is not something really good to get under the water. There's different symptoms, but one of the main ones is that you start to twitch and sort of convulse under the water. And I know you might go like, oh, you know, you're turning into a breakdancer or something like that. But it's maybe fun. It's not fun at all, because when you're twitching and shaking, then you cannot control your face muscles. You might drop your regulator. You might not be able to get it back in. And yeah, this can end badly. So oxygen toxicity is something that we never, ever want to get. Now, don't worry. I know you might go like, whoa, wait a second. I don't want to start shaking and twitching under the water. I don't like to do this PADI enriched air. But again, if you stay well within the limits, then you avoid getting oxygen toxicity. And that is why you shouldn't just, with no training, grab a nitrox tank and go scuba diving. You should always do this course, and then your instructor will teach you where those limits are, how to stay away from it. And that means we can still now go maybe to a specific depth, stay there a little bit longer to enjoy more stuff, but not so long, or we don't go so deep that we might risk oxygen toxicity. So if you want to learn more about this whole nitrox stuff, it sounds super cool, then you should ask your instructor whenever you have some time. So to prevent getting dizzy or headaches, or even worse, is to make sure that we always have good, clean air in our scuba cylinders. How do you get contaminated air in your scuba cylinders? Is maybe when they fill it up next to a factory or a running car, or the pipes just sucked in air, bad air. Maybe there was a fire close by. Also, the compressor can cause problems if it's not well maintained, if the filters are dirty and they haven't been clean or renewed. So there's all these factors that can lead up to having bad air in your scuba cylinder. Now in the next question, question number 10, it explains how to prevent it. The deeper that we're diving, the more pressure that we are having on our bodies. Remember what I said before, is that when we're breathing from our scuba tank, we are getting around 21% oxygen and 79% nitrogen into our body. We metabolize the oxygen, but we don't really metabolize the nitrogen. So under that pressure, the nitrogen is being dissolved in our tissues everywhere in our body. Now, the more and longer we stay under the water, the more nitrogen gets dissolved into our tissues every time we take a breath. Now, at a certain point, we might now risk decompression sickness. So it's important to ascend at the right time before we reach that limit to prevent decompression sickness. Now, how do you know then when we have those maximum allowable times, or NDLs, and how to stay away from them so we don't get into trouble? Well, you can use different tables. So for example, we have this one here, which we call the RDP, or Recreational Dive Planner. So it's a really handy table from PADI where you can track your nitrogen exposure and know exactly when you should end your dive on time. Like for example, here on table number 1, I know it's a bit small, you see these little black boxes in the bottom. This is your NDL, or your maximum allowable time that you can scuba dive on this dive. And then I recommend never go to the limit. Always stay a little bit away from that limit, and then you make your ascent to stay within those limits. If you want to be a bit fancier, or you don't like these tables because they have too many numbers on them, then I recommend you to use this table. This is called the PADI ERDP ML. It's very cool. It's basically this table, but now sort of in a calculator version, and you can now type in your dive profile, and it will tell you how long you can scuba dive before you risk decompression sickness. What's really cool about this table compared to this table is that you can also calculate multi-level dives with this one, so you can even do more. So ask your instructor about these tables if you'd like to learn more about it, or if you want to use them. Also, there are some videos on the channel that explains these tables a bit better. Then again though, it is 2022 and most of us are diving with these cool dive computers. So this is an actual dive computer, not a fancy watch, which is awesome. So I do like to use it as a watch as well, but when I go under the water, it goes into dive mode and it tells me everything in one go. These guys are very cool, but this is I think a lot better, and it's very accurate, and it just makes me feel so much more comfortable under the water. This is not the only dive computer out there. If you like to have, for example, a bit of a bigger one, then you can maybe go for this one. As you can see the details much more easier. Maybe you're diving with a thick wetsuit or maybe a dry suit, and a lot of those divers, they prefer these big dive computers. Or if you just want to go even more stylish and more newer, then this is one of the latest dive computer that came out. So again, there's all these different versions out there. Some dive computers you can even put on your console next to your SPG, do your pressure gauge, so you can check your air and you can instantly see all the details on your computer as well. Dive computers tell you your depth, the temperature of the water, your NDL, how long you can still dive at any certain level that you are. It tracks your nitrogen exposure throughout your surface interval, so you exactly know on the next dive what you can do too. It tells you how fast you're going up to the surface, when you can fly again, and the list goes on and on and on and on. So if you really enjoy scuba diving, I highly recommend you to get yourself a dive computer to not only make your scuba dives more safer, but to just feel much more comfortable having all your important details right there in front of you. If you're not really sure which dive computer to choose, then have a look down in the description, as I put some links of different kind of dive computers that I recommend, and go and have a check that out. So if you purchase your first diving computer, at least you know that you have a good one. So what is this decompression sickness? Now, like I just explained in the previous questions, when we're going underwater, we're under pressure. We're breathing air from our scuba tank. We metabolize the oxygen, but we don't really metabolize the nitrogen. So where does that go? Well, every time we take a breath, it goes into our system and it gets absorbed in our tissues. That is okay. It's not a problem at all. But when we're diving too long, we keep adding and adding and adding and adding nitrogen, and at some point this can cause issues. So if we then decide to make an ascent, now this nitrogen will come out of our tissues, and if we absorb too much, this can cause problems and lead to decompression sickness, which is basically then a nitrogen forming bubbles getting stuck at different locations in our body. It can be in our joints, let's say for example here in our elbow, so it's hard to move it. Just under the skin, this can cause this tingling feeling that you might have little needles stepping you wherever it is. You might get a little rash or a red spot at the area where it's happening. All of this is definitely not good, but it can also become more serious where maybe those bubbles are now blocking, for example, blood towards your heart, or even worse, to your brain at that point, and that can lead to some very, very serious conditions. So that's why we want to avoid decompression sickness by not diving on the limit or longer than the limit, but always make our ascent a little bit before that limit. And again, to know that limit, it depends on how deep you're going. So it's really important to use these dive tables to track how long you can stay and then to make a safe ascent. Remember, dive computers, they are very, very accurate, very handy, and I highly recommend you to always scuba dive a dive computer to prevent this from happening. Now, another reason of maybe getting decompression sickness is when we're going up too fast. So remember, the maximum ascent rate is 18 meters per minute. But how do you know what 18 meters per minute is under the water and how fast you are going? Again, that's where these dive computers become super, super, super handy. And on these dive computers, you have, depending on the brand, on the right or left side, what we call an ascent rate meter. And it gives us these little bars that tells us how fast we're going up. This is absolutely fantastic, and I think it's one of the best things that a dive computer has. And actually, a lot of dive computer models are much more conservative than the recommendation on the tables, which means they are set on 9 meters per minute or 10 meters per minute. And if you reach the max of that, it starts beeping, beep, 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 letting you know that you're going too fast and you should slow down. If you really push that limit, it now tells you even to stop completely for a specific amount of time. So it's really cool. So when we're making our ascent, you just leave some air out of your BCD, Then start swimming, and then you can just look at your computer ascent rate while you're swimming, but also look up, but look at your computer, and then sometimes adjust a bit of buoyancy again, so maybe let some air out of your BCD if needed. And that's basically how we're making our ascent. Or if you're using a line, you're just pulling yourself up. Do remember though to once in a while look up so you don't hit anything. So really, really handy, and staying too long or going up too fast can cause decompression sickness. If you wonder why this is happening when you're going up too fast, so picture, for example, when you're having a soda drink bottle, let's say Coca-Cola bottle or something like that, and you shake that or we drop it, we all know that when we open it instantly, what's happening, right? You see all these bubbles forming and it comes out. And that's because you instantly open from a high pressure inside the bottle to a low pressure, which is 1 bar in the air, and that huge pressure change is going to go like that. And when we are under the water, we're going up too fast. You also have a high pressure to low pressure too quick, and now we also might have bubble forming in our body. That's why we should always go up slowly on any ascent that we do while scuba diving. Let's get into the next question, number 13. So again, decompression sickness is when we maybe stay too long or went up too fast, and then the nitrogen that is releasing from our tissues starts to form bubbles which get stuck in different areas, and that can cause problems. So there's different signs and symptoms. In this particular question, it says numbness, so maybe not feeling a few of your fingers or areas like your elbow or anywhere else in your body, tingling, like little needles are stabbing you, or like feeling, have you ever had a sleepy hand or arm, when you laid on it, it feels like that. Maybe a red rash, or feeling extremely weak and tired and fatigued is a very clear sign and symptom that you might get decompression sickness after a dive. There's also worse versions where the bubble is now blocking blood flow to certain areas like the heart or your brains, and this can cause even bigger problems. You can have pain, you can feel dizzy and even unconscious. So I know it sounds all very, very scary. However, if you follow all the rules that you're learning right now in your PADI Open Water Diver course, you stay well away from your limit, then it is very unlikely you will get decompression sickness. But there's always a chance. So for this reason, you need to learn the signs and symptoms so you can recognize it on time so you can get medical attention. And that is the next step as well. If you have decompression sickness or you are in doubt, always seek medical attention from a physician or even better, a dive physician if you can, and they can do a checkup with you and then take it to the next step. So like I said, you can get decompression sickness by staying too long at a certain depth or by ascending too fast. However, there are secondary factors that might increase the risk for decompression sickness, like for example, age. So the older we are, the higher the chances we might get decompression sickness in certain conditions because of age. So usually the older we are, the weaker we get, and that means we have a higher risk of decompression sickness. So always do a medical checkup with your dive physician before you go on your next scuba dive. Second one, if you get cold. So remember as well what we explained in the previous PADI Open Water Manual Diver chapters is that when we are under the water, we can get much more colder quicker than when we are on land. So when you are not wearing the right exposure suits, you might get too cold, and this can increase the risk of decompression sickness also. Next one, any injuries you might have. Any injuries you might have, like for example scar tissue, maybe you were, in an accident before you went scuba diving, maybe you broken a bone and it hasn't healed properly yet. All of that can increase the risk of decompression sickness. And then last in this question, poor fitness and high body fat. So again, we don't have to be athletic swimmers to go scuba diving, but you should be healthy and you should have a certain fitness. If in any of these cases you just don't know if you are fit enough to go scuba diving, then download the PADI medical form and take that with you to your physician and do a proper checkup before your next scuba dive. If you don't know where to download this PADI medical form, in the description below I added a link for you to learn a little bit more about the PADI medical statement and how to download this form. Okay, so why is this important? Well, first of all, we are recreational divers. So when you get your PADI Open Water Diver certification, you are a recreational diver. But if you continue, which I recommend, to do your PADI Advanced course and you get that certification, now you're still a recreational diver. Even if you do your deep specialty course, you're still a recreational diver. So up to a depth of 40 meters, we are recreational divers. And that means that we can always make a direct descent to the surface whenever we want to. Of course, not too fast, and we always recommend you to do a safety stop at 5 meters for 3 minutes in the end of that dive. But you don't have to do a decompression stop to off-gas nitrogen before we can safely go up to the next level. Now, this is what we call decompression diving, and this is what you will learn and do when you become a technical diver. It's not a lot harder, but it is a little bit more complicated than recreational diving. So a lot of people, they just enjoy recreational diving, but some people, they just love to go a bit deeper. They love to visit these places where no one has ever been before. So if you feel that you're one of those adventurers, then ask your instructor about more information about technical diving and how you can sign up for those courses. Also, if you want to learn a little bit more about this whole difference between no-stop diving and decompression diving, on your PADI RDP table on the back, you find some information. And here it states that the recreational dive planner is designed specifically for planning recreational, no decompression dives on air only. Do not attempt to use it for planning decompression dives. So over here, again, when I go to the first table, then if you stay within these black boxes or no decompression limits, at any time here you can just make an ascent to the surface, not too fast again, while making that safety stop, but you don't have to do these forced decompression stop to off gas, as that is something you learn in technical diving. So mentioned before, the deeper that we dive, the more pressure we have on us, and it also means the faster we're absorbing nitrogen. So the shorter we can dive. So there's not a big difference between a depth of 12 and 10 meters, but there is still a difference, which means our NDL gets a little bit shorter at 12 meters than it is at 10 meters. And you can see that very clearly on the PADI RDP table. So over here, again, dive number 1, if I look at 10 meters at the top and I go all the way down to the bottom, to the black box, it says here my NDL, or no decompression limit, is 219 minutes. If I now look at 12 meters, this is right next to it, I go all the way down, now it says I can only stay for 147 minutes. So you can see there's definitely a difference there. If you might be wondering, yeah, well, what if I'm not planning my dives with these tables and I like to use dive computers? Then in the middle of your dive computer screen, it will show you the maximum allowable time, or your NDL. So when you're diving to 12 meters, which you can find at the top, then your NDL will be a specific number. If you now decide to dive to 10 meters, you will see that your NDL will be bigger and you have more time to stay under the water. We just explained it on a previous question very well, where I said that on dive computers, depending on the brand, right or left, you have these ascent rate meters, and they tell us exactly how fast we're going up. When we reach that limit, it starts beeping, beep, 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 reminding you to slow down or stop for some time before you continue your ascent. If you ignore that and you keep going up, now you're risking decompression sickness because we might go up too fast. So again, dive computers are awesome because they really help us to know exactly how fast we're going and to prevent us from getting decompression sickness. What we mean with a repetitive dive is the second dive or the third dive or the fourth dive, so not the first dive. So for example, on your first dive, you went to, let's say, 12 meters, where your NDL was 147 minutes. If you now do your second dive, when you're going to the exact same depth of 12 meters, you're going to find out that your NDL suddenly is shorter. Now the reason why is because when we finish our first dive, so we ascend all the way to the surface, we still have nitrogen in our body. And while we're on the surface, we're breathing that out over time. Now let's say you go back into the water an hour later to do your second dive, then we still have nitrogen in our system. However, it's going to be a lot less than when we came up from the surface because we breathed it out on our surface interval. Now there's a little bit of nitrogen that we still have left. When we go on our second dive, we absorb new nitrogen and we kind of have to add that together with the nitrogen we still had in our body from the previous dive. So then when we come up, we now know how much nitrogen we have for the next dive. But because we still have some nitrogen left from our first dive, our maximum allowable time, or NDLs, are now going to be a little bit shorter. If you're liking it, don't forget to do all of this that is on my t-shirt. Alright, so when we're going scuba diving with our buddy, then each of us should have a dive computer on us. Now, under the water, remember that we might have different conditions, like for example, we might have some currents or it might be a little bit cold. And also, depending on the brand, if your buddy dives with a different brand dive computer, so the way that your buddy's dive computer calculates might be slightly different than your dive computer as you're using a different brand. So even if you are using the same brand dive computer, remember that we're all a little bit different as well. So when we're scuba diving, we have these two factors that tell us when to turn us around. First of all, how much nitrogen we are absorbing and what is our NDL. And second is how much air we have left in our scuba tank to make sure that when we turn and we go back, that we still have enough air left to reach the entry point or the boat. So whichever one comes first is when we're turning around. On some dives, maybe because there's a bit of a current, you're going to find out that you're running lower on air much quicker than, for example, your NDL, so you're going to turn around. On another dive, you're going to find out that you have plenty of air and it's all good, but you're at a specific depth that your NDL now might say, all right, it's time for you to turn around. So it really depends how deep we're diving, how the conditions are with currents, how much you're breathing, your body, how much he's breathing. So it really depends. Sometimes it's going to be your NDL and sometimes it's going to be your air consumption that tells you when to turn a dive. So when you dive with another person, they might have a different band dive computer, which means sometimes that different dive computer can be a little bit more conservative. Maybe your dive buddy has already done a dive before and he has much lower NDLs or other data. Whatever you choose, always choose the most conservative dive computer from the two to know what to do on the dive to stay safe. So this is being repeated all the time. Your computer will give you your maximum NDL. That doesn't mean you should dive to exactly that time. Always stay a little bit away from that. At least 5 minutes, but sometimes even more than that. If you have an ascent rate meter telling you how fast you're going, you shouldn't let it go all the way to the max and then keep that speed. You should stay away from that. And to be honest, I always like to make it a mission to have my ascent rate meter go up as slow as possible. Sometimes only even one little bar when I'm making my ascent. So stay well within the limits. So when you dive with another person, they might have a different band dive computer, which means sometimes that different dive computer can be a little bit more conservative. Maybe your dive buddy has already done a dive before and he has much lower NDLs or other data. Whatever you choose, always choose the most conservative dive computer from the two to know what to do on the dive to stay safe. You should always go down in the beginning to the deepest point and then just make an ascent and go a bit shallower and a bit shallower and a bit shallower, kind of like a multi-level dive profile back up to the surface. it's being tested that you lower the risk of decompression sickness when you always go to the deepest point first and then gradually going shallower until the end of the dive. So again, always go slow. Your dive computer will tell you exactly how fast you're going, so that's fantastic. And also remember that we should do this safety stop at 5 meters for 3 minutes. Now, how do you know where that is? Yeah, you can use a depth gauge meter, you can use a dive watch, but a dive computer is much more easier because between, depending on the brand, 3 and 6 meters, it will go automatically into safety stop mode, which means that the NDL number usually disappears and then it gets replaced by a 3 and that counts down to a 2, to a 1, and then you get these little lines that tell you it's safe to go up to the surface, which is awesome. Now do try to stay at around 5 meters at all times. If you can hold on to an ascent line, that's even better. And if not, you just have to enjoy your buoyancy. And again, you're going to be practicing this a lot throughout your PADI Open Water Diver course. You should always follow your dive computer's manufacturer recommendations. This is extremely important. And how do you know them? Well, there's a little manual that comes with your dive computer. Read it or download it on a PDF from their website. A lot of people that I found out, they just don't want to read these manuals and they just want to go and dive and play with it. And even up to their Dive Master training course, a lot of them, they still don't really know a lot of functions of their dive computer. And of course, this can be dangerous. So do make sure you check that manual before you go scuba diving with your dive computer. It's very unlikely that your diving computer fails, fantastically built, however it can happen. In my entire career, and I have done over 7,000 dives, I had my dive computer malfunctioning once on me. So it is possible, but very, very rare. How do you know it's malfunctioning? Well, it can be different things, like it can appear and disappear. It could be flashing. It could go on and off. You never really know what happens, but when it happens, you do know. And in this case, you don't know how long you've been diving with a bad dive computer, so I wouldn't risk it anymore. Don't continue diving, just cancel the dive, go up nice and slowly, do your safety stop if your air permits it, and then go up to the surface. Now, when you reach the surface, then don't go scuba diving anymore. Monitor yourself for decompression sickness. If you're not 100% sure, check yourself up with a physician and always contact your diving computer service station and explain to them what happened so they can have a look at your computer, fix it, or you might need to replace your computer. Last question, number 23 of this PADI Open Water Diver Manual answers chapter number 4. So why do we love scuba diving so much? It's because when we're going scuba diving, we can visit these beautiful reefs with an incredible diversity of aquatic life. Fish everywhere, crabs, stingrays, sharks, beautiful, colorful coral everywhere, and it's amazing. And we need to make sure that we take care of it, not only for ourselves, but also for a future generation to enjoy it. These reefs have been here for thousands of years and they're extremely delicate. If you touch it slightly, you can damage it, you can break it, you can kill it, you can affect a lot of organisms around it. If there's stress on it, it gets even worse. So whenever we go scuba diving, always make sure that you have this mesh bag with you so you can collect some trash. And that means you're a much more environmentally friendly scuba diver. Now there's more to it. A lot of animal species are on the brink of extinction, especially sharks and rays are in trouble. You also have global warming, which causes coral to bleach, and the list goes on and on and on and on. A lot of people in the world, they might not care so much about the underwater world. It's because they just can't see it. But we scuba divers, we are there all the time. So we are the best ambassadors to help to protect this beautiful environment. Now, if you're not really sure where to start, besides maybe picking up a bit of trash everywhere, then have a look in that description where you can find a link to some more information about PADI Aware. And PADI Aware does so many different things to help to protect our oceans and all the life that's in it. And you can be part of that in so many different ways, from super easy things to much more harder, intensive things. There is something to do for anyone. And in the end, if you really don't have any time or any energy to help in these conservation programs, then maybe at least you can leave a deposit, because with that money, other people and PADI Aware can do really, really good things. So again, don't forget to check that link and to spread this information and awareness to others. Even the easiest thing is to maybe just copy and paste that link and put it on your social media, and it might now inspire or influence other people to help out. So I hope that you enjoy scuba diving, and hopefully you will be a very environmentally friendly scuba diver. Welcome back to this video. In this video, we're going to cover the PADI Open Water Manual Diver Answers, chapter number 5, which is also the last chapter in your PADI Open Water Diver course. So if you have followed chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4 so far, then great job. I know it's a lot of information, but hopefully it helped you to finish your dive theory and your PADI exam. All right, let's dive right into it. Question number 1. So basically in this question, you've done your first dive, you went to 15 meters for 60 minutes, which is a very normal dive time. Then you're going up to the surface, and now you're having what we call a surface interval, which is a break in between your first and your second dive. Some people, they do it for 45 minutes, some people do it for an hour, and some people do it longer. In certain cases, you want to get back in the water as fast as possible because maybe there's something cool to see. And then we have something what we call a minimum surface interval. And we need to use our dive computer or dive tables to find that. In this particular case, you just really loved your first dive and you just want to go back to exactly the same depth of 15 meters for the same dive time as 60 minutes. But what we need to do right now is we need to find out how long we have to wait on the surface so we can actually do a 60-minute dive to that depth without going over our NDLs or our maximum allowable dive times. Now, if you have a dive computer that actually has a planning function, then you can use that. Otherwise, what happens is that after a certain time on the surface interval, you're breathing out lots of nitrogen, your computer tracks that, you're going to go under the water again, and then at any depth, it just gives you an adjusted no decompression limit, telling you how long you can stay there. So by using maybe a dive table like an RDP or an ERDP-ML, so this is an RDP, Recreational Dive Planner, and this is an ERDP-ML, which is basically the same thing but an electronical version. We can also calculate our minimum surface intervals to reach a certain maximum dive time. So you have different options to play with. Now, if you don't really like to use these tables, or even want to carry one of these ones with you, or maybe the battery is finished, then there's actually an ERDP-ML app as well that you can have on your smartphone. So if you want to have this app, then you can go to your app store and then download the PADI ERDP-ML app. I will also help you by putting a link in the description below how to get this app easily. No, I'm not making any commission on this, so it's really up to you if you like to have this app or not. It's a really handy app to have on your phone. So remember from chapter number 1 that we already have some pressure around us right now, even when we're on the surface or on land. And that is all the air that's surrounding us. And we have 1 bar of pressure on us right now. But that's because we are at sea level. So if we are going up even higher, so for example, we're going into mountains, and yes, there's some very beautiful diving in mountains, in beautiful mountain lakes and stuff. When you get there, you might now be a lot higher than sea level, maybe at 400 meters or 800 meters or 1,000 meters. And now we have less pressure surrounding us, and that will affect how we absorb and release nitrogen under the water. So when we're diving at altitude, because we have lesser pressure around us, we're actually releasing nitrogen much faster than what we're doing at sea level. And for that reason, when we're doing altitude diving, we have special procedures that we need to follow. Like for example, right now at sea level, our maximum ascent rate is 18 meters per minute. But when we are diving at altitude, your maximum ascent rate is recommended now at 9 meters per minute. So that's half the time. So you can see there is a bit of a difference. So if you are interested in diving at altitude, or you might be living in areas with these beautiful lakes that are at altitude, if you want to get a bit more information about that course, then ask your instructor during your PADI Open Water Dive course or afterwards how to get that specialty. You might be at a location where they just don't have altitude diving, but maybe then that person can recommend you to find the right dive center at altitude. So again, even if you're certified after PADI Open Water, you can't just go diving at altitude. You need to have special training, as you need to learn about these special procedures. So why do we need to wait before we get into an airplane? When we take off on an airplane, it goes from sea level to a lower altitude very fast. Not only that, we are in a cabin and the cabin is pressurized, and there will be a pressure difference as well. Remember that when you're on an airplane, that you actually feel some pressure on your ears, and in some or most cases, we have to equalize as well when we're in the airplane. So we have a pressure change when we're in an airplane, the same as we have a pressure change when we're under the water. So this means that we can actually get decompression sickness if you fly too fast after your last dive. So how do we know then how long we have to wait before we can get in that airplane? Well, again, that is where these dive tables become very, very handy. Because on the back of this dive table, or over here in the ERDPML, or again here on my larger version, you actually have an area here that says flying after diving recommendations. That's really awesome. It says here, for single dives, a minimum pre-flight service interval of 12 hours is recommended. Now in this question, remember it says here, I just finished a no-stop dive with my buddy. We have not been diving in the past several days. So this is the only dive that we make. So that's a single dive, and now waiting time before you can go flying is 12 hours. It states here also that if you do any repetitive dives, if you do 2, 3, or 4 dives, now you have to wait for 18 hours before you can fly again. If you want to wait longer, that's always fine. Sometimes some instructors, some dive centers, they recommend you to wait longer as well. You might hear sometimes 24 hours. It's only to be more conservative, and the longer the better, of course. Whenever you're in doubt, the longer is better, of course. So it's really cool about these diving computers. It doesn't just tell us how deep we are, the temperature, our ascent rate, but it also tells us where we can fly again, which is awesome. Most computer models, they will have a little airplane in there that says no to use or stop, which means you cannot fly. Once that goes away, now you're okay to fly again. By the way, if you guys are kind of getting interested in having a dive computer by yourself, I really personally love this computer. It has a color screen. Everything is super easy to look at. And to be honest, I've dived with so many different computer brands, and every time I dive with this computer, it just calms me down. It's kind of my extra dive buddy that I have. So this one is really awesome. It's not super expensive. It's really mid-range. In the description below, I put an affiliated link, then you can find a bit more information about this computer and how to purchase one yourself. Again, let's go back to the tables. RDP and ERDPML. On the ERDPML, you find all those rules here, and now I know it's super small right now, but actually right here it says diving at altitude 300 meters or greater requires special training and procedures. The same information you will find on this RDP table right over here, and if it's a bit easier for you to see right now on the bigger one, you find it right over here. So over here, you find when planning a dive in cold water or under conditions that might be
strenuous. I'm not 100% sure if I pronounced that correct. I'm from Holland, yeah, so it's not always that easy. Plan the dive assuming the depth is 4 meters deeper than actual. So the reason why is because we have a higher risk of decompression sickness whenever we are cold or we are in stressful conditions. The reason is that we might end up with more nitrogen than our tables or our dive computer tracks. The dive computer or these tables, they don't know if you are under stress under the water. So you might be under the water, you didn't anticipate the cold temperature, you really feel cold. There might be a bit of a current as well that you have to fight. It's just not good conditions, and then this might happen. Remember though that if you ever end up in these conditions that are extremely uncomfortable, just cancel the dive, go back up to the surface. Just in case, recalculate your dive plan from before and add that you were assuming that you were 4 meters deeper than actual, and now you can adjust the plan for your second dive to stay safe. Before we learn that when we're doing recreational diving, that we don't have to make any necessary decompression stops. If you want, you can always go back up to the surface, slowly of course, but we do recommend you to make that safety stop in the end of the dive. However, if we accidentally exceed our no decompression limit, or again, easier, the maximum allowable time that we can stay, now we have to make a decompression stop just to make sure that we stay in acceptable limits. So how do you know how long you have to do these decompression stops? Okay, going back to your RDP table, it says over here, emergency decompression. If a no decompression limit is exceeded by no more than 5 minutes, so less than 5 minutes, an 8-minute decompression stop is mandatory at 5 meters. Upon surfacing, the diver must remain out of the water for at least 6 hours before you do another scuba dive and monitor yourself for signs and symptoms of decompression sickness. Now, if we exceed it for longer than 5 minutes, now we should go up again nice and slow to 5 meters and then do a decompression stop for at least 15 minutes. Then when we surface, don't dive for at least 24 hours. Now, of course, if your air supply runs low, then of course go up to the surface. Again, monitor yourself for decompression sickness, and anytime you're in doubt, you can always find a dive physician. Going back to dive computers again, they are so much more cooler. And the reason why is because if you are exceeding your NDL on a dive computer, it will actually beep, so reminding you that you're reaching the limit, which is awesome. And then if you still go over it, it will actually tell you to which step you should ascend and how long you should stay there. And that's one of the reasons why I always say you should always dive with a dive computer. Question number 7 of the PADI Open Water Diver Manual answers of chapter number 5. We are halfway through this chapter. You're almost done with all the knowledge review questions right into it. So well done on you. So far, if you're liking it, don't forget to smash that like button and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and ring that notification bell. It will be amazing if you could share this video on your social media so it might help other beginner divers as well. All right, question number 7. So if you came in a situation where you had to make a decompression stop and you didn't do it for whatever reason, or you just forgot about it and you're surfacing and you go, oh no, we had to do a decompression stop. Should I dive back into the water? No, never recompress in the water. Just stay on the boat, just relax. If you need, breathe oxygen and check yourself for decompression sickness. Not everyone gets decompression sickness. However, you're increasing the risk of decompression sickness. So you might not end up with that decompression sickness, even if you did not do a decompression stop when you needed it to do that. That doesn't mean now that you should break the rules all the time. These rules are there for a reason. So keep following them just in the unlikely event. And remember, anytime you're in doubt, you can always check with a physician, dive physician, or check with your scuba diving insurance. Talking about scuba diving insurance, it's very important when you go scuba diving that you are insured. go and check if you are insured. There's multiple different insurances that you can choose from, but if you don't really know which one to choose, I always recommend to check out DAN, which stands for Divers Alert Network. In the description below, I will put a link for you to find more information for the best diving insurance for you. Yes, like I just mentioned, if you need to do a decompression stop for 8 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever your dive computer is telling you, but you realize on your gauge that you're actually running out of air or you not have enough air to finish it, then of course you should go up to the surface. We're not fish, we can't breathe under the water. Again, make your ascent all the way up, nice and slow, and just monitor yourself for decompression sickness, as we don't always get decompression sickness if we don't fully follow what we had to follow, but we have a much more higher chance to getting it. So follow those rules, complete your decompression stops if you can, but if you're running out of air, of course you have to go up. Just monitor yourself, and if you're in doubt, go and check yourself out with that physician. First of all, decompression illness can be decompression sickness and or lung overexpansion injury. So it's kind of like an umbrella name for both of these cases. Sometimes people come up with decompression sickness. Sometimes people come up to the surface, they might get unconscious. We don't know if they might have decompression sickness and at the same time they might have lung overexpansion injury. So we call this decompression illness. In this case, we treat it the same way. So first of all, we check if the person is breathing, and if they stop breathing, we have to start CPR. If you're worried about giving people CPR or not knowing how to look, feel for breathing, then we highly recommend you to join at least the EFR, the Emergency First Response course. You can do this straight off the open water course and ask your instructor for more information. But then on top of that, your PADI Rescue Diver course will help a lot, which means that after this open water course, join the PADI Advanced course, and then you go into PADI Rescue Diver. Again, all of this your instructor can tell you all about it, and it's super fun, I can tell you, and at the same time, extremely rewarding. So even with an EFR certification or a PADI Rescue Diver certification, we're not doctors. So it's very important that you contact medical service as soon as possible. So when they come, they can take over from you. Now, and then provide emergency oxygen. This is something that we learn in our EFR course, we learn in our PADI Rescue Diver course, but highly recommend to specialists, but highly recommend to get a little bit more specialized in this by doing the PADI Oxygen Provider Specialty course. Super good course, not hard to learn, and you can easily integrate it into any other course, which means it's very good for any schedules if you're a bit on a tight schedule on your holidays. All right, anyway, all of this you can ask your instructor. So let's move on to the next question. If you don't know what a recompression chamber is, it's basically this big tube where you go in, and then what they do, they close it and then they put pressure in this sort of like chamber that you're in. And it's kind of going on a dive again. If you go into one of these chambers and they put the pressure on, you actually have to equalize as well. As you are descending, you're not really physically descending, but the pressure is increasing, which is the same thing as descending. So, for example, in the unlikely event, you might end up with decompression sickness and you got some bubbles forming in your body. Those bubbles are stuck right now at 1 bar of pressure on the surface and they can't get out of your system. Then, in most cases, they put you in this decompression chamber. They increase the pressure. So now these bubbles of nitrogen, the gas gets dissolved into your tissues again. And then they start releasing that pressure in the chamber. So ascending you, bringing you back up to the surface, but this time extremely slow. Much slower is that when we are actually trying to swim back up to the surface. Also, they do this very, very controlled. And if there's any problems, they can stop the pressure and they can help you with any of these issues. And it's a fantastic solution how to cure decompression sickness. Another great thing about these chambers is that usually there is someone with you inside or monitoring you from the outside. If you need to take any medication, you can as well when you're in this chamber. Did you never try to recompress yourself by jumping back into the water and now staying at that certain depth? Because nobody's there to monitor you. You probably run out of air because you never can do that slow ascent. And you also cannot take any medication under the water. For this reason, if you have decompression sickness on land, the only and best way will be recompression chamber and not going back into the water. If you want to learn a little bit more about decompression sickness, lung overexpansion injury, decompression illness in general, and recompression chamber, I will put a link in the description from Dan, from that insurance company that I just talked about, where they give you really detailed information about these topics. So don't forget to check that out if you want to learn a little bit more about it. This is called gas narcosis, or some people call it nitrogen narcosis. So basically what this is, when we are scuba diving and we're under all this pressure of water, remember that the deeper we go, the more pressure we get on top of us. So when we are breathing from our regulator and then from our scuba tank, we are getting air into our body. And that air, again, is around 21% oxygen and 79% nitrogen. The oxygen we are using in our body, but the nitrogen gets dissolved into our tissues. If we're going too deep and the pressure increases too much on top of us, the nitrogen gas can actually start to cause an effect on our nervous system. And that can cause a feeling of feeling like disorientated a little bit, and you sometimes euphoria, you're feeling really happy. Some people are giggling a little bit, which is actually kind of fun. Some people they have the opposite effect and they start to feel a little bit nervous or anxiety. Some people just feel really intoxicated, like the same kind of feeling when they may be drunk too much. So this gas narcosis can cause a different effect on different people. Some people get it at a certain depth and pressure, while another person exactly the same depth and pressure doesn't get it. So everybody's a little bit different with this. When you're recreational diving and you're diving on air, gas narcosis can still happen. And for that reason, we need to be aware of that, and we need to be able to recognize it and to deal with it when it happens. The reason why is because when you start to feel intoxicated under the water, you might now have slower reactions, you might not care too much about checking your air anymore, and that can lead to problems. So it's very important that when you feel a little bit weird under the water, just signal your body and just ascend a little bit. And because we are ascending, we have less pressure, and in effect, gets lower or it goes away. So you don't always have to cancel your dive. You just go a little bit shallower and then just stay at that depth. But over here, I have a underwater compass. I really like this compass. You have different models. You can have them on your wrist, like this one. Some of them, they can be mounted on your SPG. Some people prefer that. I like to have them on my wrist. So then, same as my computer, it is all right there in front of me for me to look at. You can put it on the same arm as your computer. So there's different ways of putting it on there. I don't know if you can see it, but I kind of have to turn it like this to the camera. But here is the needle, and right now it's pointing this way. This is not actually really north right now, and the reason why is because inside of this compass there's a fluid, and the fluid is there to protect the compass from breaking with all the pressure around it. So this is a special design underwater compass. If I would turn it like this, more horizontal, now I can instantly see that the needle is moving and it's pointing that way right now, and for me that is north. I absolutely love to use an underwater compass under the water because it really helps me to navigate the dive site, but also it really calms me down, because knowing where you are and having a sense of direction is really good to calm down the nerves. Do you remember the first time you went to a specific city and you didn't know where to go and you were starting to get lost? It feels really uncomfortable, right? It's exactly the same under the water. So by having an underwater compass, I feel a lot more relaxed, knowing where you are and knowing where you are going. So if you don't have an underwater compass yet, highly recommend you to get one of these compasses as well. And I will put some links in the description below for some of the underwater compasses I recommend you to get if you want to check that out. So how do we set one of these compasses? Well, the thing is, there's actually multiple different ways of setting your compass, from extremely simple to a little bit more effort to much more harder, where you have to calculate and using those numbers. Is one way better than the other? Well, it really depends on the situation, you as a person, to be honest, and what you want to do with the compass. I like to teach to my students all the different versions because then they can choose whatever they want. But I'm not sure what your instructor is going to teach you. Some instructors, they teach a little bit more, for example, in the PADI Advanced course or in a navigation specialty down the road. So just ask your instructor about different ways of using your compass if you like to learn a little bit more about it. So let me now give you the way to do it by using the headings or the numbers that you have on your compass. First of all, this here is what we call the bezel, and you can turn it 360 degrees. Then over here, you got what we call these two little index marks over here. And then also we got one index mark on the other side. In the middle right here, you have a line, which we call the lubber line. Wherever you aim this line is also where you're actually going to. Again, I can show you now, but because of the liquid inside, it gets a bit stuck. But here we got the needle pointing magnetic north. Over here, we got the W from west. And then over here, we got the E from east. On the other side from north will be south. You will see a lot of numbers right here inside of your compass as well. And these numbers, they relate to these numbers here on the bezel. You can see the numbers inside by using this little window right here that you can also use to navigate. Some people prefer to look on top of the compass, and some people prefer to look on top and to use this little window. So it really depends on what you want. If we wear this compass, let's see if I can squeeze into it with my computer right now. I like to wear it on my left wrist, but you can also have it on the right. It really depends on what you're putting on your arm. Always wear your underwater compass with this little window facing towards you. The best position under the water if you want to navigate with a compass is to stretch your right arm, and your left hand goes over your right elbow like this. The reason why is because now we're keeping it really straight, and wherever you're aiming your hand, it's parallel to that lubber line. So you're actually aiming your lubber line where you're aiming your hand. Another thing that's awesome is that we're keeping it straight, because if you're going to look at it like a watch, a lot of new divers do that, then again, the needle gets stuck, so it doesn't give you the right direction. So let's say that I want to go 90 degrees and then turn around and come back the opposite direction, which is 270 degrees. The first thing that I do is I'm turning my bezel until I turn 90 at the top, right over here of my lubber line. The top, I mean facing away from me. So 90 is at the top, so that's where I want to go to. Now, I'm not actually facing 90 right now if I'm aiming somewhere. So how do I know? All right, I'm going to look at the top of my compass, and what I need to do is to get this point of the needle magnetic north into these two little index marks by turning my body. So I'm turning until I should have chosen a different number. Now I have 90 at the top of my lubber line, and my needle north is in between these two little index marks. If I look at my small little window here, it also says 90. So now I'm facing 90. And now I start swimming for a certain amount of kick cycles or time or whatever you like to choose. Now, once I want to turn around, I'm going to stop, I'm going to look down my lubber line to the opposite of 90, and I'm going to find that 270 is there, which means it's the opposite So which means it's the opposite direction and I want to go that way. To go that way, again, I'm going to turn my vessel until 270 is now at the top. And now I'm going to turn around again like this until the needle's in between the two index marks. And now I'm facing 270 at the top. And that's where I'm going to. Double check your little window. It says 270 as well. And I start swimming again for the same amount of kick cycles or time as the first time. And then I should return to my starting point. Question number 14. So in your first course, the PADI Open Water Diver course, you're going to do 4 open water dives. On dive 1 and 2, your maximum depth is 12 meters. And on dive 3 and 4, your maximum depth is 18 meters. That doesn't mean you have to go to 12 or you have to go to 18. You can always go shallower. Sometimes the dive site just doesn't permit you to go deeper. Let's say, for example, dive 1 might be 12 meters and then dive 2 might be 8 meters. Sometimes you can't get to 18 for whatever reason, so you might go to 16 meters. So it depends a little bit where you are and where you're doing your PADI Open Water Diver course. It also depends on other factors like maybe your instructor or you as a person and how comfortable that you're feeling. If you then, in your open water diver course, went to a max depth of 16 meters, then when you now do future dives, you should go to a depth of 16 meters, unless you're going with a trained PADI professional again. And now they, under supervision, can teach you to go a little bit deeper. The reason why is that we always want to dive to our experience level that we have been trained for. This is very important. You can even relate it to something else. Let's say on your PADI Open Water Diver course, you've been diving in the perfect conditions, crystal clear waters, super nice, no currents. Then after you certify, should you now go to, let's say, the North Sea with a lot less visibility, lots of waves on the surface, there might be currents? No, of course not. Even if you are certified to go to 18 meters, you should still not dive there without extra training. But if you maybe have learned this PADI Open Water Diver course in much harder conditions, can you now easily dive without any extra training in easier conditions in the tropics? Yes, of course you can. If you're ever in doubt, not knowing if you are experienced or ready to dive in certain conditions after your PADI Open Water Diver course, go to a PADI dive shop, ask for a PADI dive master and PADI instructor, and explain your story. And then explain your experience to them, and they can advise you what to do next. Now, if you're already kind of going like, yeah, but 18 meters, I want to go deeper. I want to see more stuff. I want to go to areas where no one has been before. I heard maybe Salty Aquatic Life might be a little bit bigger when we go deeper as well. I'm super interested in finding that stuff. Then you can join with the PADI Advanced Open Water Diver course. I cannot recommend you enough to do this. No, I'm not making any money with this. There's no commissions or affiliated link to this one. So trust me on this one. The PADI Open Water Dive course is fantastic. You definitely get certified and you're definitely a super cool scuba diver. But being a PADI Advanced Open Water Diver will open up so many more doors for you. So first of all, you're now going to learn to go to a maximum depth of 30 meters, which will open up a lot more dive sites around the world for you. You also learn more about underwater navigation, which is awesome because you're going to feel more comfortable and now you can explore dive sites even better. And then you can also choose from elective dives. You can choose to learn more about aquatic life under the water. You can get underwater scooters and learn how to dive with that, like almost like being James Bond. Learning how to use your underwater cameras a lot better, which is amazing. And you can even do a scuba dive in the dark, which we would call the night dive. For me personally, this is one of the best dives you can ever choose for. It is so different than day diving. It feels like being on another planet. So if you ever wanted to go into outer space, then this is the closest you get to it. Also, because we have a torch under the water and you shine it on the reef, you're going to see it in its original color of red, neon purple, yellow, every color you can imagine everywhere when you are doing this night dive. So it is one of the best experiences that you can do. It's super fun. And you can now go to so many more dive sites around the world. So anyway, I can talk for hours about this PADI Advanced course. If you're interested in this, it doesn't have to take very long. So talk to your instructor for more information how to join on that course. So anyway, guys, I really hope you like this PADI Open Water Diver Manual answers of chapter number 5. If you have completed chapter number 1, 2, 3, and 4 also, then well done on you, as you now completed all the knowledge view questions of the PADI Open Water Diver course. I hope it helped you and that you are well prepared for your PADI Open Water Diver course exam. Again, if you liked it, please hit that like button under the video, share this video with as many people as possible, and don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell. Now, over here on the screen, you already see another video popping up, which are all the PADI Open Water Diver course skills that you're going to learn in this course. So if you haven't checked it out, go and check it out, as this video can really help you to prepare you for all the skills and how you can be one of the best scuba divers out there. All right, divers, see you on the next video.